tonight, right now, right where we're at, I want you to welcome the one and only returning to the studio, Mr. Eric Leeds. This is getting like more and more like a morning show.
Yeah, really.
He's like, I was about to turn it off.
No, it's not a morning show, because if a morning show, I wouldn't be on it.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Morning and me don't get along.
No, I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. It's so good to have you back. One of the things we want to talk about, we wanted to bring you back on after the World Series, because you were watching those Dodgers like a hawk, and you were like you said you got 2 innings, and you come back on after the World Series.
Which, by the way, that was the first time we've ever measured our time in innings.
Innings.
It was very vague.
It's like the worst component of time, because it could be 10 minutes.
It could be anything. Yeah.
2 hours.
I got to tell you, I don't know why this year more than ever I'm having baseball withdrawal. I don't know what the hell to do with myself right now, because literally most years, beginning with spring training till the last out of the World Series, my schedule and what I do every day is based around when the Yankee game starts and then when the Dodger game starts. Because I'm a Yankee fan anymore, I'm a Dodger fan. Don't ask me to explain that, because I can't. But I watch every Yankee game and every Dodger game just about. So I don't know what the hell to do with myself right now. Having said that, congratulations to the Braves. Because they sure as hell did it. I mean, they not only won the postseason, they dominated pretty much every series they were in.
They did.
And
shocking.
Awesome though. I will take it.
We were re-listening to this. I was going to bring it up. We were re-listening to this, and one of the sound bite that I was going to take from that was he said, "Well, Atlanta's good, but they're not World Series good." And I wanted so badly to take that
very
clip.
wrong.
Yeah.
Terribly sorry, everyone out there.
Well,
I'm not a Braves fan, but I'm sorry.
Yeah, he said it. That guy right there.
Well, one reason why the only reason I'm really happy for the Braves is I think I mentioned last time I was on, tenor saxophone player, dear friend of mine, Jim Eminger, who played in a band that I played with for many, many years, and he's in Pittsburgh. He's a die-hard Braves fan. And he's a baseball guru. So I'm happy for my buddy Jim, because his boys won. And Jim sent me an email yesterday where he mentioned that the Las Vegas odds on the Braves winning the World Series in August, before they actually started to play well, was something like 500 to 1. So
wow.
So if anyone had bet like $100, they'd be like $50,000 to the good right now. So
Crazy.
That's
think about that next year. So
well, the odds will not be the
I
same.
think the odds will be a little different.
No,
It'll be a little bit different.
No, but I mean, it's like it's almost worth it to like take the worst team that you could possibly think and just bet $10, because if you lose $10, what the hell, So, but anyway, I'm happy for my buddy Jim, the Iceman. He's he gets to spend the postseason or the off season, being happy about his Braves. So, and I tell you what, I mean, it's they got hot at the right time.
Yeah,
and
right.
pitching, man. They gave the World Series MVP to Soler, which I could see, but I would have given it to the freaking bullpen.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Like a co MVP to those guys, particularly Motzik and Smith. I mean, oh my God, and Fried stepped up. He'd had some rough starts, but he stepped up in that last game and just, oh boy, it was great. So, and I wasn't going to root for Houston. I couldn't root for Houston. So, by then I was like, okay, Braves, I'm all in. So,
yeah, Tamar was a little bit, because Tamar is from Houston, and she was, I know she was pulling for the Astros, and it was like, I'm sorry that didn't happen.
Well, the only cat on Houston that I was interested in playing well was Correa, because I'm envisioning him in pinstripes next year. So,
wow.
Anyway, so we'll see.
So we had you on before, and we had like a ton of questions, but I'm so glad that you kind of feel a little bit content though going through all that baseball. Do you not like football at all? Is baseball
it's not even my radar screen.
Really?
It's There's a friend of mine, the singer Billy Price, who I played with my friend Jim. He once described all the other games. I'm sure he didn't come up with the phrase, but he would refer to all of the other games in pro sports as back and forth games, because everything in football, hockey, basketball, and even like tennis or soccer, all the play is back and forth. You know,
Right.
everything, teams going this end to score, the offense, defense, then you turn around and go the other way. Baseball is every direction at once. I mean, you got a ball going one way, you got some cat in the outfield chasing it with his back to what's going on. The guy who hit the ball is just running around in a freaking circle. Now, who the hell ever came up with that? It's the silliest game that was ever invented. But it is the only athletic pursuit really that I am into at all. The other games, the back and forth games, is they back and forth, and you know.
Yeah, one of the things I happened to note about football was the fact that, you know, when you get to the Super Bowl, you got one game. And if you have a bad day, that's it. You're out. There is no 7 games where, okay, let's figure out and re-strategize. So that's the one thing I appreciate about football, is just like, you got to be
from the other thing. That's what I like about baseball, because baseball, you can, there's one thing about the postseason now, because I'm old school. All of my preferences and my teams, the Yankees, Dodgers, or whatever, notwithstanding, the World Series should have been the Giants and Tampa Bay. I mean, if you want to really think about it, old school. The regular season used to be called the championship season, and there was one winner from each league, and they went to the World Series. Even with divisions, at least, you had a 7-game division series, but now with the wild card and all of that, the postseason is really more or less like a tournament, and it really doesn't have that much relationship to the regular season like it used to. So I have to keep reminding myself that, because the postseason, the really marquee matchup should have been the Dodgers and the Giants in the second game, or in the second series, rather than the 5-game series. And it's just the quirks of the way it worked out this year. So by the time, you got the Giants at 107 wins, and they're gone by the first divisional series, and they're sitting watching the Dodgers collapse. Right. So, I'm not a Giant fan, I'm a Dodger fan. So the Giants are like the evil empire for a Dodger fan. But even from that stand, as a baseball fan, I'm sitting there, Giants fan, damn. They're just looking at this and say, what the? So and the same with Tampa Bay. So you got Houston. Okay, Houston, won their division, but the Braves, give me a break. But once again, the Braves got hot, and every series they just bap, done. That was it.
That was it. When they lost that 3rd game in Atlanta, everybody in Atlanta was like, "Oh, please don't tell me this is the Super Bowl all over again."
I know the same thing. I was looking at my wife. I'm like, "Oh, here we go."
Sorry, when they came back to Houston and said, "Okay, enough of this. We're winning this tonight." And Fried was just on. I was, my only thing about baseball today is, you can take the cat out after 76 pitches. And if it ain't, once again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But that's baseball now. Unfortunately, the pitcher goes in for 3 innings. Okay, he's done. But anyway, they won, and they deserved it. So
they did.
All right, they earned it.
They earned it completely.
Wait till next year.
That's what Braves fans were saying for about 20-something years.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this, Eric. If you happen to be in Atlanta at any point in time during the baseball season, just give me a ring. I'll be more than happy to take you to the Brave Stadium. Had you seen that Brave Stadium? I know.
No, I haven't seen that, because when I lived in Atlanta from fall of '83, through '86 or whatever, and that's when I was starting to work with Prince, so I really was on the road an awful lot. But in that first year and a half that I was there, I lived in Beretta for a time, and then we lived up in Kennesaw for a while. And I used to go to Braves games all the time. And back in those days, old Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, which was a pit. It was a really, really ugly, and it was not kept up particularly well either. But the good thing is I could go and get a field box seat for like $7.
Right.
And no matter where it was, by the 3rd or 4th inning, I was moving down behind home plate.
Oh yeah,
because there was nobody going to the games then.
Right.
In fact, the only games that people would go to when the Dodgers were in town. So, you know.
Well, next time if you happen to be in Atlanta, please make sure we'll get you to a game. Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. We're gonna get you taken care of. I know that I can see all these people like, not baseball again.
No,
it's not his fault. It's our fault.
We did bring it up.
We're in Atlanta right now, so
he
we
had to
kind of
rub my face.
Hey, you know, I mean, it's like the only thing I love more than music is baseball. So sorry, boys. You know?
Yeah.
In fact, the funny thing was a Prince story is we were in L.A. Me and Matt Bliston, Atlanta Bliss, a trumpet player, my dear friend from Pittsburgh and Atlanta, who was my section mate all the years that I was with Prince's band. We were out in L.A. For a week or what recording with Prince, but this is before Paisley was built, and we used to do most of our recording in LA at Sunset Sound. And one evening we weren't needed, so Dodgers were in town, so I said, we're in LA, we're going to Dodger game. So me and Matt went to the Dodger game. So we got game in about 10:30, and we're driving back into West Hollywood, and we said, well, let's stop by the studio if Prince is there. Sometimes it was like if we show up, with Prince, it was like out of state, out of mind. But if you're in his face, then he might find something for us to do, and that's another paycheck. I mean, studio paycheck. So let's drop by the studio, and who knows, maybe get a paycheck out of it. This is what we did for a living. So anyway, we stopped by the studio, and I had a Dodger jacket on, and he looked and said, "What have you been doing tonight?" And I said, well, me and, went to a ball game. Prince was into basketball, but baseball was something he couldn't relate to at all because of the pace of the game and everything. It was just not that, Prince had he had the patience of a mosquito. So, I mean, baseball was not something he could relate to. He just looked at me like, you went to a baseball game? It was something so completely out of his, and I was like, well, yeah. So anyway.
So have you ever attended an event? I mean, what type of events have you been to with Prince outside of, the studio or anything that's unusual? I mean, like, have you gone to a basketball game with him or anything like that?
No. Concert once.
Oh, okay.
Interesting story. Yeah, it was. It was at the time that I was out in LA. We were doing those Flesh sessions. This was like December. It was right after Christmas of '85, I think it was. And I had been in Florida. My parents at the time lived in South Florida, and I was there for the holidays. And my brother called me that like the day after Christmas, said Prince needs you out in LA. And I said, oh man, the hell. But he said, no, it's only for a day and easy to come. Well, it was the session that we did the Miles Davis song, Can I Play With You? So that was cool. Anyway, anyway, I knew better than to expect that I was only going to be there for a day or two. So like a week goes by, week and a half. And well, anyway, it's the week went by. It's like New Year's. And Brent says to me, he said, what are you doing New Year's? And I said, I was supposed to be in South Florida with my family, but I'm here, so I assume I'm going to be in my hotel room watching the ball go down on, at the Times Square at 9:00 LA time on TV. That's what I'm doing New Year's. You my record call me out here for and he says to me, well, Patti LaBelle is playing a New Year's Eve concert at the Universal Amphitheater tomorrow night, and he said, let's go. And I said, well, okay, that sounds better. So anyway, then it was Prince, Jerome, Benton, and myself, and I think it was purposely a late concert because I vaguely remember that she sang "Auld Lang Syne" at midnight. So I guess it was a late concert. Wow. So we went, and it was interesting because I had seen Patti LaBelle, several times over the years. We were talking about the Chitlin Circuit last time I was on,
right?
And I remember seeing Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells back in the 60s when I was a kid. I also saw her a couple of times in the late 70s, early 80s. She was doing a gospel show called Your Arm Is Too Short to Box with God. She was on the road with. It was absolutely one of the most phenomenal evenings of music I had ever heard. In fact, she did it in New York with Al Green. Patti LaBelle and Al Green doing a gospel concert. that was absolutely just, beyond belief. So I had seen Patty several times, never got a chance to see her with LaBelle. And that's something I was always, never had that opportunity. But anyway, Prince had never seen Patty live before, ever. So I was just like, all right, well,
right.
But it was interesting because it was one of the rare occasions where I was with Prince, where he was really a little bit out of character, which was extremely rare, because he was always Prince, that entity, that thing that he invented, because he invented himself.
Right.
But this is a time where he was really, interested, not only because it was Patty, just one of the greatest singers in the legacy of this music, but watching a performer that was so different from himself. And a couple of times he would make comments that were, out of character for him. There was one point where she would engage with the audience, just step out and kind of walk the stage, and she'd like talk to the audience and whatever. And this was like, this is like 85 or whatever. And Prince leaned over to me and said, "Oh my God, she's fearless. How she engages with the audience directly like that." And she was a pro and knew how to do that. Right. Because if somebody wanted to, she might ask a question of somebody or whatever, someone might stand up and, "I love Patty," and she might, have a conversation. But if somebody started to get a little too deep or too fresh, she knew how to immediately cut them off,
cancel it
in a way that didn't embarrass them, but just made it part of the show. Like I think there was one guy that stood up and he started to want to flirt with her. And at that point, she just said, "Honey, I'm scared of you," and just went on to that. And the whole crowd falls up, and it becomes part of the show. And Prince leaned over to me and said, "I would never in my life know how to do that."
Right.
Now, years and years later, Prince did become more, at times more engaging with the audience. But at that time, it was still, that wall was there, that the thing. And it was just interesting to hear him, step out of that and just kind of be a little bit more revealing of something about himself. And but it was just curious. Some of the comments that he just made about the band that she had, that, all of a sudden I'm sitting and I'm talking with somebody who's a fan of the music,
right,
rather than just somebody who's like, who he was. And I could probably count on one hand the experiences I ever had with him, where he would step out of character like that. So it was an interesting and enjoyable night, because first of all, I wasn't in my hotel room watching the damn ball come down Times Square, and I was listening to Patti LaBelle, which I would have maybe done even without Prince if I.
And you would see pieces of that. Him. Yeah, you would see pieces of that in the after shows and stuff. He would do a little bit more, engaging with the audience. But the only time I think I heard it the most was during the One Night Alone tour, on those recordings, One Night Alone Live, where he's, conversing with the audience, especially during the song Family Name, when he was doing all this, "What's your last name, Rebecca?"
Right. Yeah.
So that was really unusual to kind of hear him really do that.
By then, in fact, I did a few gigs with him. On that tour. It was some of the last gigs I ever do, and after I was subbing for Maceo on some of the gigs that Maceo couldn't do. And I hadn't, it was around, I guess that was around 2002 or something. I hadn't seen or talked to Prince in like 6-7 years. There had been a gap where we just had gone our own ways.
Right.
But he, at sound checks, he was doing a thing then where members of his fan club would come into the sound check. And he would do shtick with them like that. But Prince learned how to do it, and kind of like Patti LaBelle, but he learned how to do it in a manner that he could control everything.
Right.
And because he was inviting the people in, there was kind of a stipulation that, okay, this is still Prince's house.
Right.
And so it was still very, very much very calculated.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
everything he did was calculated. So
Yeah.
Prince was not somebody that was ever going to even allow himself to be in a situation where he wasn't going to be in control.
Yeah.
But he knew over the year, you know, he learned, you know, over the years, when something started to look a little bit hinky, he knew how to get the hell out quick.
Right.
He was a master at exit lines.
Move, yes.
Stage, you know,
right.
yeah, just like cut it off and said, that's what, out the room, out the door, gone.
Yeah, the Jimmy Fallon story when he's playing ping pong with him and he won the game and he like slammed the ball and Jimmy bent down to pick up the ping pong ball and he comes back up and Prince is gone. Master of exits.
Yeah, very typical. Like,
so we had a bunch of questions that we had left over from that we have on our list, but I also want to make sure that I get these crowd questions in here too, because especially Jeremy J. Souls here, because he was asking this question the entire time last time we were on.
Yeah.
So Jeremy, want to make sure that we get this question out for you. He says, what was it like playing with D'Angelo at Bonnaroo in 2015?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, you know, that hookup, you know, my brother Alan was D'Angelo's manager at that time, among other things. And so there was, you know, I'd known D'Angelo off and on through the years. And that was, you know, it was really put together by Questlove. I mean, he was the straw boss. He was the guy who put the whole thing together. He was the one who had to convince D'Angelo to come do it, because I think that was at a time where D'Angelo had not performed live in a while. Yeah. And it was like Questlove was kind of, you know, just, and I have a feeling Questlove wasn't convinced that D was going to show until he was there. You know, it was kind of like that. And Questlove basically was who reached out to me to ask me if it was, you know, if I was interested in doing it. I said, yeah, it was, you know, Pino Palladino and other cats from the Roots.
Was Jesse at that show?
Yeah, he was on. Yeah, he was on that too.
Was at that show too. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was, you know, it was just one rehearsal on day of the show.
Wow.
It was, you know, Quest had sent us all like a song list of things he wanted to do. Because I was the only horn. I was kind of like just a fly on the wall. You know, all I had to do was just sit there and just react. And Quest or D would say, okay, here's, you know, give me a cue for a horn solo, and was okay. All I need, you know, I didn't know. I can't remember half of the songs of what we did. And I don't think a lot of the songs I was even really that familiar with, other than know, okay, you know, this is in the key of E flat. And there's like a breakdown here or whatever. And here's something, because basically, you know, I wasn't going to know what I was going to do until I was there. So, you know,
right.
Which was fine. So, you know, I didn't have to sweat it, just show up and do the gig. So it was fun. I mean, Bonnaroo, I don't know if any of y'all have been at Bonnaroo. It was the only time I was there, but I mean, that, you know, the festival goes on for several days.
Right.
We were not on the main stage. We were on, you know, there are like 4 or 5 stages outdoors that music's going on constantly and often at the same time. And in fact, the Roots, Questlove and his band, the Roots, were one of the headliners on the main stage earlier that night. And they were playing between, you know, probably in front of like 50, 60,000 people. Our gig with D started I think it started at midnight, somewhere around there. And we were in a smaller venue, a tent, but even that must have been 10, 12,000 people crammed into that. Yeah.
That's crazy.
So,
with a lineup like that, it's just amazing to me that wasn't on the main stage. But again, as you said, Quest wasn't even sure that D'Angelo was even going to show.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
So you're like, I want to be on the main stage, but I really need to see him like get out of the car.
Yeah, exactly.
The stage.
Yeah.
Well, let's make sure.
But yeah, I mean, it was fun. You know, like I say, it was just like flew in the day before, did the rehearsal, did the gig. We were all in a flight getting out, like I think like 2 or 3 hours after we got off the stage, went right to the airport, and I'm out back home. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Sylvia asked, Eric, do you have any Prince records in that collection behind you?
I've got some, not many. I have maybe 3 or 4.
Yeah, it's
and
of course they're probably the more popular ones like Purple Rain and.
No, I don't have Purple Rain.
What?
Oh, wow.
Okay.
No.
Well, yeah.
No.
Is it the ones that you're featured on, or?
Well, the only album of Prince's that I ever bought was 1999. And all the other albums are the ones that I was on, maybe because I got them for free, you know. And
Right. Yeah.
I do have some of the CDs that were released later. I think I have Diamonds and Pearls or some of the other things, you know, because I would just get them.
And what compelled you to buy 1999?
My brother, Alan. Alan had gotten into Prince. I think around the time of Controversy. Alan, a friend of Alan's. We were still living in Pittsburgh. Alan was still living in Pittsburgh before he moved to New York again. And a friend of Alan's had convinced him to go to see Prince when Prince was playing in Pittsburgh. And I guess it's probably 81 or 82, somewhere around there, I guess. And Alan wasn't really into Prince yet. And he was blown away. I mean, he was just blown away by it. Just thought it was, you know, hippest thing he'd seen in years. And he got into Prince around Controversy. So the first song of Prince's that I remember that I could put that name to was Controversy. And it didn't do anything for me at all. Just one ear out the other. Just didn't speak to me. So anyway, my brother and I probably our musical DNA is probably about 99.5% the same, you know, as far as the things that really mean to me, the same thing, because I grew up under Alan's tutelage more or less, and my exposure to the music was mainly because of Alan through the years. Right. There's certain artists that I absolutely love that he may not be into and vice versa, but really not that many. So there was also, we're both kind of musical evangelicals, because when we get into something, we're determined that the other has to also be into it to the same extent that we are. So when Alan got into Prince, his goal was that I had to be into Prince. You understand? You know? And if I wasn't into Prince, then I'm, well, you're not hip, you're not into, you know, all of that. And I was not getting into Prince, you know, judging, and Alan was not pleased with that. Now, this is long before, you know, Alan worked for Prince or anything. Alan just was, well, now, you know, you're supposed to be into this because I'm into it. You know, that's all. That's how this works. I'm into it. You're supposed to be into it, you know. And I said, sorry, you know, so far this ain't working for me. Now, 1999 came out, the song, and that I liked. You know, that was, it was, you know, much more of a traditional R&B groove. You know, basically, right. Once it get past the, you know, the synthesizer, when it gets into the vamp out, then it's just guitar, and there's a funk groove. I said, okay, I could relate to that. That's cool. Yeah. So my brother said by then he had the 1999 album. He said, hey, you got to get the album. You know, I said, all right, I get the album. To shut him up, I'll get the album. And I bought the album, and I think I listened to it once or twice, and that was that.
Well,
you know.
Well, you know, there's something that you made me think of something. You had your brother, you guys had similar tastes, but when you're not in the same thing, he wasn't in the same thing, you know, that kind of thing. When it happened, it was supposed to happen. And then you also mentioned you weren't into Prince originally. And I remember seeing somewhere with Miles Davis, you mentioned him earlier as well. Mm-hmm. There was a time where you weren't really a fan of Miles Davis. And then it was a specific album that came out. It was In a Silent Way.
Well, yeah. And you know, I had some Miles Davis albums. Mm-hmm. You know, I think I suppose I had Kind of Blue. I had some of the others. One of the reasons I wasn't into Miles wasn't because I had even listened to his music, is because things that he would say about musicians that I was into. And I was at a young enough age then that impression of, you know, it's like, how dare Miles talk about Eric Dolphy like that? Right. You know, like that. You know. Right. Now, years later, I understood exactly what Miles and what it was about. You know, so it was like, okay. But yeah, it was in literally, I was, you know, so much what I was into is Coltrane and what was known as the avant-garde. Pharoah Sanders, Archie Shepp, Coltrane, even a little bit of Albert Ayler. I was a Sun Ra freak. I mean, I got about 50 Sun Ra albums. Don't ask me why, but I do. You know, that's the shit that I was really into in Roland Kirk, Joe Henderson, you know, and Cannonball and a lot of the hard bobcats too. But for whatever reason, I had never really, you know, dived into Miles. And literally one day I'm in a record store and I'm looking at the bin of Miles Davis records, which is like got 100 albums in it. And I said, I need to get some Miles Davis.
Right.
So I looked through the bin and I'm thinking, well, let me try to figure out what his latest album is. And it happened to have been In a Silent Way. And
which is 4 songs pretty much.
Right.
4 songs. Now, was it the entire compilation, or was there one particular song that pulled you in and made you say, okay, there really is something here? Because like,
well, it was the whole album. And interestingly, I was looking at the personnel. And I knew who the cats were in Miles's band at the time, but In a Silent Way had all these other cats on it, Chick Corea and Joe Zawinul, the piano player.
Yes, yeah.
That's why I bought the album, because I was a Joe Zawinul fanatic.
Got it.
I've been into Zawinul for all of the years that he was Cannonball Adderley's piano player, and he was one of my favorite jazz musicians. And I bought that. I said, Joe Zawinul is playing on a Miles Davis album. I said, oh my God, I got to get this. It was just so completely different that, and I had no really expectation as to what Miles was into then.
Right.
I guess I expected that it was going to be pretty much, you know, acoustic hard bop or whatever that, you know, that was. I wasn't even into Sorcerer and Nefertiti or that shit yet. So I was a big gap. All of a sudden it's like, where the hell is this coming from?
Yeah.
There was something in music that I was searching for, because all the jazz was still, and was either Latin jazz or swing rhythms, you know, old time jazz, you know, swing rhythms.
Mm-hmm.
But now James Brown and R&B and funk had turned all that upside down. And the whole rhythmic pulse of progressive music was getting away from that into what we think of as like duple meter rhythms, funk, rock rhythms, or whatever. And I was desperately trying to hear music and see, can progressive jazz cats take funk rhythms and do something with it that's not just a cliche or trying to dumb it down like some artists that said, okay, I'm going to try to make a pop record, you know, Ramsey Lewis and shit like that. Said, no, that's not what I like. Now, Lee Morgan did it with Sidewinder, but that was, you know, and here comes Charles Lloyd with his band, with Keith Jarrett and Jack DeJohnette and those cats. And I said, okay, they're starting to get there. But, and Coltrane in Coltrane is dead by then, but even in Coltrane's last year or so, he was getting into different kinds of rhythms and stuff and trying to, I said, somehow someone's got to take these rhythms and take Cold Sweat and make legitimate progressive hardcore jazz with that feel. And all of a sudden, here comes In a Silent Way, and I'm saying, oh, wow, here it is. I mean, it's getting there. Now, the next thing, 6 months later, here comes Bitches Brew.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's a game changer right there.
Yeah. Well, that's it, because now I'd started to start to fill in some of the gaps. But literally, when In the Silent Way, I used to come home from high school and listen to that album in its entirety every day.
Wow.
And I still can't figure it out what it was, you know. But
well,
6-7 months later, now I'm reading Downbeat magazine, and the ads are coming for this album, Bitches Brew. Now I got to understand that in that time, to even be able to in print say that word in that context, you know, it's like that summer in summer '70, Miles played on the Dick Cavett show, the old late night show. The Dick Cavett show went up against Carson, and Dick Cavett could not show the album cover on TV because of the word, you know. So anyway, here comes Bitches, and I'm looking at all the pre-publicity for the album. I said, okay, Zawinul's on this again. All right, shit. I said, John McLaughlin, who I first heard with On the Silent Way. And I said, oh my God, there are what, 2 or 3 drummers on this album. I said, what the hell is this is going to be? So I'm like, I don't know what this is going to be, but I'm like so much into A Silent Way. And I'm thinking this is either going to be the greatest thing in the history of music, or it's going to be the biggest dud.
Right.
You know,
right.
And literally, there was, you know, in Pittsburgh at the time, there was National Record Mart. That was the big record store. And I happened to know a guy who worked at the main store downtown. And there were suburban stores. There was one right up the street from me, but they wouldn't get the records until like a week after they'd hit the main store. And I actually knew when Columbia Records would deliver their product. And I called his friend down. I said, what day did Columbia comes in when? He said, comes in Thursdays. I said, okay. I said, and I called him. I came home from high school. I said, you get the Columbia shipment? And he said, yeah, I'm unboxing it now. And he said, and I said, is the new Miles Davis in it? And he said, it should be. He said, it's on the list. I haven't unboxed it yet. I said, I'll see you in 10 minutes. I literally went downtown, got in the car, went downtown. And I don't know if it makes a good story, but whatever. There were 3 of them in the bin that he put in the bin. And literally the first one out was mine. And
wow.
Yeah. And I went home and listened to that album, and there was no album of music in my life which was more significant for me in kind of defining for me in my own, in best case scenario, anything that I would want to do in music, it better feel like this. Doesn't have to sound like this or be this, but it better represent something for me that this does.
Right.
Because everything in music that I ever could possibly wanting to hear or feel was in that album. Now there are other albums that mean that much to me, but that was the first one. It was like the rainbow come, ta-da, the rainbow, the trumpet sound. And it was like, okay, this is what I do with my life.
Yeah, and what about any LP album? Matter of fact, let's bring Mr. Paul Peterson in here. Paul,
there he is.
Oh,
there he is.
Eric, your soliloquy was putting me right to sleep. It was wonderful. Thank you.
That's nothing new. You're used to that.
Oh,
It's
just like a lullaby.
Well, see, the thing about it is like I am like consciously writing down all these, some of these artists and things and specific albums in general that you're mentioning, Eric. I'm just like, I don't think I've ever heard that album. Some of the artists that you've mentioned too, I've kind of
they're all dead.
Big. It doesn't matter.
That's the thing you got to remember.
All the best
heroes are dead.
All the best stuff is
all the dead guys.
So my brother constantly tells me, he said he didn't even bother talking about anything in music or art that's not at least 25, 30 years old now, because he knows I don't hear it.
Well, P-Funk asked, he said, do you have any Blue Note album suggestions? But I was just like, no, we're not going to go there.
Yeah. I mean, you got 3 hours. I mean,
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Art Blakey is like, 50, 30, 40 albums just alone. Go buy the Art Blakey albums. That's a good place to start, Anyway.
Less CDs. Okay. Well, Paul, it's so good to have you. Did you have a show tonight, or you have a show coming on later tonight?
I'm actually in the studio.
Oh, okay.
Producing a friend of mine who's patiently waiting for me over there, so I can't stay long. But I had to come on and say hi to you guys. I mean,
absolutely,
man. Excellent.
Not you so much, Eric, but
well, so we wanted to we wanted to talk about this.
Yes.
We wanted to talk about this particular album here. And I had actually gone to a show and I purchased one of these, and the lady who was running, or the person that was running the table, gave me this cellophane wrap. And I was like, oh wow, this is like multiple CDs. This is amazing. And I get back to the hotel and I open it up, and there's like 5 CDs of the same CD in it. And I remember calling you and I said, should I do a giveaway, or can I send these back to you? And you're like, no, do a giveaway.
Right.
So luckily I got to ask you, because Rob and I were re-listening to this. This is, for those who don't know, this is No Words, which is an amazing CD.
Well, thank you.
But we also, and we did want to ask you about some of the names of the songs on here, like 15 Minutes of Shame, and where some of this stuff came from. But you guys have one. First off, can anybody even get this anymore? Because it was originally like a.
Yeah, we did it through a crowdfund.
But it's still there. We go. There we go.
Yeah, you did it through a crowdfunding.
Yeah. Okay, we are hereby announcing that relatively soon, possibly within the next several weeks, it will be available to the public.
Yes.
All of the news and information about where to get to it, we tell everybody go to our website, which is leedspetersonmusic.com.
Okay, fantastic.
leedspetersonmusic.com. All of the information, because we're still, to be honest, we're still figuring out the different ways and how we're going to release it. We got several options that we're going to be pursuing, and all of the information about how to get it, either as a download or as a physical medium, and autographed or non-autographed. If you'd like to pay more for us to autograph it, we'll do that. If you'd like to pay more for us not to autograph it, we'll do that too. We'll take your money any way we can figure out. And we might actually, but go to our website, leedspetersonmusic.com, and we are going to, within the next week or so, we'll have specific information up there as to how you can procure this particular item.
Awesome.
Oh man, it's because this, let me tell you, this CD is fantastic. So I'm so glad that it's going to be released. Now, I do have a question about the history of U2 and this, and the LP project, which I was blessed enough to see in Minneapolis. And were either one of you aware of the other before the family project?
No.
Because Eric, you were kind of brought, so you weren't aware. Okay, that's
no.
I didn't even meet Paul. I didn't even meet Paul until after I'd done the first recording sessions for the family album.
I think I was on it yet.
No, you weren't, because when I was recording the first 4 or 5 tracks, I was listening to Prince's vocals on them.
Yeah, I do remember, and I think we actually have some of his guide vocals and everything. So I guess, was it ever considered that he may be a part of that project or singing, or did he like zone in that he absolutely was going to have a vocalist come in and he just hadn't decided who it was going to be?
No. Those were guides. Paul had already been hired for the band.
Gotcha.
But yeah.
Right. Jeff, you had a question in here.
Yeah. It's kind of a history question. You had, it's for St. Paul, of course, you had done your thing, and then you guys had decided to, the group broke up, and then it came back together.
Right.
But it came back together with a totally different name.
FDeluxe. Right.
Yeah.
And so I was curious as to, was there a specific reason that you didn't keep the same name because it had a following and people were really familiar with the family? So what was the reason for changing the name?
Paul?
I got Beck, and we were all out to dinner. Susanna Jellybean, Alan Leeds, Eric Leeds, myself. Am I missing anybody? But all of a sudden we're at
Suze was there.
Suze was there.
Yeah.
We were at a restaurant, and I get a phone call that says, Prince wants you to come out to Paisley. I'm like, what? How does he know we're together, first of all? So I come into Paisley. I go out there, and he basically says, I hear you're recording a new record. I'm like, yeah, man, I got it with me. He says, I don't want to hear it. But you can't call it the family. You're missing the primary songwriter and poet and producer. You can't have that name without me. I said, oh, well, why don't you come along for the ride? He said, not this time. But he basically was saying that he owned that. And I had to
he owned the name.
He did own the name. Actually, he doesn't own the name.
No, he didn't. Yeah, but
the Osmonds owned the name, the family.
Oh,
I believe, is from my research. I could be wrong, but that's what I found out.
Well, couldn't you have
worked with, by the way?
Yeah, couldn't you have pulled some strings? You used to be the bassist for the house band for Donnie and Marie TV show.
Right. I mean,
you could have pulled some strings and go, look,
both Donnie and Chris wanted to sue me. No. and they called it, I'm gonna sue you.
Right.
So I ended up coming back and telling everybody what happened. We had a good chuckle out of it. Actually, Prince and I were basically on the mend at that point. We had a good laugh, but he's basically saying, you can't really do that without me. And I said, as I was leaving the studio at Paisley, we were walking out by where he's got the mural. And I had not been out there in years, and I hadn't seen the mural. He had his light up tennis shoes on. And of course, I gave him shit about that. I'm like, Prince, your shoes are on fire. He said, have you seen this? He pointed to the wall, and I said, wow, no, that's really cool. He led me out the door.
I'm Paul. I'm surprised you didn't say his tenny bumps.
Tenny bumps.
What's the story here?
On a shoot with the family. He said, tenny bumps. You should listen to what you're saying. You've never heard. I don't know why I called it that. I don't even know where I got that terminology, but he didn't like that. Anyways, I digressed. We're walking out the door. I said, dude, what would it look like if we would do another family record? He said, well, probably re-release it, add a few new songs. I said, well, let me release this and then we'll talk about it. He's like, that sounds great. So that's why we didn't call it The Family. And forgive me, I'm trying to get a cold, and it's not COVID.
Did Suze come up? Was it you or Suze that came up with the name FDeluxe?
I'm going to give her credit for that one.
Yeah, I thought I remember it was Suze. Yeah.
Well, I think that's the same thing that happened with The Time as well. But he refused to let them use the name because he was not part of the songwriting process, and they had to become the original seven. So this was like he was really, really protective about his, I guess, properties, creations, whatever, IP, I mean, but again, to Paul's note, he didn't even own The Family. That was an Osmond.
Nobody could have sued me anyway, and my wife's like, honey, I like my house. Leave it alone.
Even if he didn't win, he could have made that journey. Brutal.
Can you imagine?
Right.
And to the extent that a new name, my own opinion then was that anybody who was familiar with The Family and knew that, okay, Paul Peterson, Susanna Melvoin, Jelly Bean Johnson, Eric Leeds have put a new record, they knew who we were. Yeah. So we could have called ourselves the
Banana,
the Dookie Heads, and it wouldn't
have been a better name.
Which is actually a pretty good name. I was just thinking.
Or the truth.
And for people outside, if we were, which we unfortunately were never really able to do, but if we had been able to get that music to a broader audience, the Prince connection wasn't relevant.
Right.
You know, for somebody else, maybe somebody was 30 years old and say, hey, I really like this album. Well, they used to be The Family. Who? Like, what the hell? Right. I don't care about that. I like this and this FDeluxe, so that's cool. So
just because I got to be good to my person who's waiting for me in the studio, I just wanted to say thanks for letting me pop onto Eric's portion of the thing here. And
absolutely.
Yeah, and as soon as you're off, I'll give him the real lowdown on LP.
Tell him who's really, tell him who's boss.
Yeah.
All
right. You,
Paul, I'll reach out to you. We'll get you back on when you're not in the studio, because I know you got tons of stories to tell. And Paul, thank you so much for stopping in. And again,
we do this right when we're releasing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do that.
Yeah,
you got my phone number. Just send me a text and say we're about to do it, and let's do it.
Probably right around Thanksgiving or right after. So.
Okay, that's what we're kind of shooting for. Yeah,
we'll get you on.
Yeah,
thanks, you guys.
We need your Christmas money. Yeah.
Good time to release it. Do it on Black Friday.
There you go.
There you go.
Bad idea. See you guys later.
Bye, Paulie. Bye, Paulie.
Bye, then, Mr. Eric.
All right, Paulie. Yeah. You see, now I got to say something about Paul. It's like, when I knew Paul in The Family, he was like, 20-year-old kid. Mm-hmm. And all I knew is he was the kid who was going to be the lead singer in this band that I was going to be in for a minute. And when Paul left the project and went away and whatever, then I shifted over to Prince. There was probably, 10 years or so where I never saw Paul because there wasn't any real reason. He was off doing his thing. I was still, and then we in the late 90s, occasionally Paul and I might, do a gig together, or we would just do some of the old family stuff or whatever, like at Bunkers or one of the clubs around here. And then when we got together to do FDeluxe again, and then about 6-7 years ago, maybe, Paul and I were at a concert, and a very good friend of ours, who's a extraordinarily well-known, successful jazz musician, whose name I'm not going to mention because of this, he was doing something that was a little off kilter for him. And it was cool. It was really cool. But it was something that was kind of simple in nature. I'm just going to say it was, And Paul and I were digging, and we were grooving because it was really cool. But Paul looked at me and says, well, shit, we could do that. So that's how LP started. Now here's the thing. I had no real idea outside of like the pop music or the funk or R&B, or pop music that were doing FDeluxe, that Paul's a tremendous songwriter and producer. And I know he's just a tremendous musician. But I had no real understanding or knowledge of what he really would be able to bring to something like what we do in LP music.
Right.
The guy doesn't have a clue. Now, what I mean by that, he doesn't have the references. Oh, because right. Okay. He didn't grow up. Now he's probably about 10, 12 years younger than me. So, he grew up. Now he grew up in a musical family where the Peterson family is like the first family of music in the Twin Cities. His older brother, Ricky, who is a first call keyboard player, is David Sanborn's musical director for years, does a lot of pop rock, but Ricky is just a beast of a jazz player among everything else. Mm-hmm. And Ricky had played on my record, so so I was more familiar with Ricky as the kind of player he was, and I even was with Paul. And we were doing some jams and just getting musicians together and just jamming and recording things and just seeing what we got. And Paul would pick up the guitar, among other things, and he started to play some shit. And I look and I said, "Damn, you sound like John Abercrombie." And he said, "Who?" Yeah, I mean, I know, maybe a lot of your audience know, but John Abercrombie was sadly passed away several years ago. But John Abercrombie is one of the most significant guitar players in progressive music and jazz, both acoustic jazz, electric jazz, everything. He's a fabulous and just these sensibilities that Paul has. And when we started to work on and do gigs, and then started to work on this recording, I realized, oh my God, I've got like a mine, a gold mine of musicianship here that is just, where the hell does this come from? Because I know where all my shit comes from. Paul did, other than Paul having grown up as the youngest of 5 siblings, all of whom are musicians. All of and remarkable music. His sisters Patty and Linda, his oldest brother Billy, who's a bassist and piano player, Ricky, but as far as the intrinsic musical creativity, Paul's the cat. And I would come in with ideas about a certain song, and Paul would take it and run with it, and he would come back with this harmonic sophistication that is like, where did you come up with this? And he said, well, I grew up in that family. I had, it was sink or swim. Plus, Paul knows Tin Pan Alley. He knows standards. I mean, Paul can pick up an upright bass, acoustic bass, and go play a gig and just play standards all night long. So he's got that. But it's hilarious for me because I know where all the references are, all this, and Paul doesn't have that background. But what he does have is the music.
Right. That's all you need.
And that's all you know. And there's a thing about musicians that you can share a certain appreciation or certain like-minded, likes and dislikes of certain friends of mine that are musicians, doesn't necessarily mean that translates to when you're actually playing music. Right. I've had friends, buddies of mine that think, that might think and say the same things musically or feel, but when you get in a room, sometimes it just doesn't work. Mm-hmm. It's not right or wrong, it just whatever. It just doesn't. Particularly when it comes to things like harmony, which is something that is probably the most interesting part of music for me, and a particular harmonic thing that I kind of gravitate to. Well, it just so happens that luck of the draw is that a lot of Paul's harmonic sensibility just fits perfectly with how I'm hearing things. But the greatest thing about it is, and this is a lesson for all musicians. I've done a lot of recording on my own, where basically I'm the only one making the final decisions about anything. When you have somebody that can take an idea that you have, that I might have for a piece of music, and Paul can run with it and come back the next day, and I can sit there and I say, gee, you know something, Paul? That's exactly what I would have done, except I didn't. You did. Mm-hmm. And you just showed me something about an idea I had that I wouldn't have even thought of. Mm-hmm. So it's an ability to hear an idea that I might have realized outside of what I would, because left to my own devices, I only can do what I can do. But now I've got something more, right? And vice versa. Paul comes up with an idea about something, and I'll say, well, why don't we do this, that, or the other? And then it becomes something that's greater than the sum of its parts. Right. And when you find somebody like that you can have that immediate dialogue and chemistry, whatever you want to call it, that's worth its weight in gold. The other thing about Paul is he is an absolute superb producer as far as his ability, and he knows Pro Tools inside, out, and backwards. So working with him in the studio is like bap, 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 bap. And I can come up with an idea about something, and immediately he says, oh, this is how we do that. And I'm saying, oh, shit. There it is, and that's, so it works. And you've got this palette of all of these colors and all of these things that Paul can bring to it. Mm-hmm. And I got to tell you that working with him on this LP project is probably one of the most wonderful, musical experiences I've ever had. And it comes from somebody that literally, I can't talk to him about the references because he doesn't know, So it's funny to me. At the same time, I said, damn, this is like, Paul is like, and I would have had no idea about that just from working with him with FDeluxe. Not that he brings everything in, but this is something else entirely, So
well, I was looking at this. I was looking at this album here. I was, and again, we're talking about this particular album of No Words, and it showed that the executive producer is your brother. It says,
well, okay, yeah,
well, that's what's listed.
Yeah, that's
other names as well, but
right. Okay, that's a part of the crowdfund.
Gotcha.
Because that when we did it through a crowdfund that doesn't exist anymore. Fortunately, it was called Pledge Music. And when you put up there is how these things work. They're all the different tiers.
Yeah.
And basically, you give us $20, you'll get the CD. You give us $25, you'll get an autograph CD. On and on and on. For $500. You're an executive producer.
Gotcha.
Now I got to tell you, we put up one that we just figured, well, we'll put it up and not expect that anybody. For $5,000, Paul and I will come to your home and we'll play for you.
Oh
wow!
Boy.
There was a cat in San Diego that did it.
Oh
wow! Yeah.
Wow. And how did that show go?
It was cool. He invited some friends of his to his house. He had a little PA system.
Would it be awkward if you walked in? It was just him on a couch going, go ahead.
Hey guys, let's go.
We had already been paid.
Oh,
already been paid. This is whatever it is. It's your house, your show, whatever. It's not just all we ask. Keep your clothes on.
Right.
That'd be really awkward. Just walk in and he's sitting in there in his underwear eating Hot Pockets, and you're like,
right? Yeah. No.
Okay, here we go.
Paul and I would say, hit it. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Hey,
That's a
Oh, my baby.
Yeah, absolutely.
You may not know the answer to this. Somebody's asking this question. I want to know if the estate is going to reissue or re-release the Madhouse. Or I don't imagine you're probably privy to any of that information, but maybe you are.
No, wouldn't have no idea. Yeah.
It's.
I mean, they'll. I mean, my own feelings about Madhouse notwithstanding, from it would be good for my wallet, I suppose, because I have a piece of that. Now I don't know if the estate knows that I have a piece of it. That's something I don't know. And if they do, they would find out real quick.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of.
Now.
I mean, you have a little piece of that, but I was kind of interested because I heard that the Revolution all had to share 1 point of Purple Rain.
I don't know.
Which is shocking to me, but the fact that you have a piece of Madhouse is actually says a lot, I guess, for the respect that Prince has. Not that he didn't have respect for that band, but
well, let me in real world terms, 1% or even 1/5 of 1% for Purple Rain is probably going to be about 20 times anything that I was going to make from Madhouse.
Right.
So. There's an old saying that we used to remember James Brown saying, 100% of nothing is still nothing.
Yeah, right. Ross said he used to sit into some of the live streams when FDeluxe was coming together, and they were a ton of fun. Susanna, Eric, Jellybean, and Eric have such a great rapport and vibe. This was something that Prince did actively. We didn't really do much of, but he did it with Third Eye Girl, especially. He would always put up these live snippets and stuff, and it was just crafting songs as they were coming together, and you would see them get released and captured and whatnot in the form of Menstrual Cycle or the Toe Jam or whatever it was called. There's got to be a good segment of outtakes that probably existed for this whole FDeluxe when you were putting it together. Is there any didn't one of you guys have a question about like a new album being released soon? Or
I think it was actually we were talking about this. I don't remember. There might have been something. Paul had a single. I think it was a single.
Oh, well, yeah, I know he had Something in the Water. That he had that song, but I don't know if that was attached to an album. Yeah, we forgot to ask him when he was doing.
He's got a single coming out in 22. He's got something coming out next year.
Oh yeah, I think he does. Yeah. I'm not sure what it is, but yeah.
But yeah, it'd be really cool to hear some of the outtakes and some of the other extra stuff from FDeluxe. And
actually, I don't really remember if I don't really think we had any. I think basically everything we did went on the album. We've done some other FDeluxe albums. We did an album called AM Static, which was an album of covers. That we did, and then we did a live album also with FDeluxe, and those are all available. Probably there's Paul and I, I've got a website, Paul's got a website. We have Leeds Peterson music.com for LP, and then there's the FDeluxe website. So you go to FDeluxe website, and all the CDs that we've done for that are up on that, I'm sure.
And whatever happened with The Truth, because a lot of people don't remember The Truth, but it was, and I know that was originally that was a project that was put together for it was a charitable reason that was put together for.
Well, it was actually put together by the guy who was the manager. His name is Jeff Taube, who was the manager for Stokely Williams and Mint Condition. Mm-hmm. And it was basically his idea, and it was a bar band. It was just like getting a bunch of us together to play at bunkers and wherever around Minneapolis.
It was fantastic. The recording is unbelievable.
The CD came out. Yeah, CD came out good. It was Kirk Johnson was usually the drummer. He was kind of the straw boss of the band. Stokely played drums on a couple of gigs, I think, and Jellybean was Paul, myself, Jerry Hubbard. keyboard player Donnie LaMarca from Minneapolis, who's a friend of all of ours or whatever. And from time to time, other people might sit in and play the gig. It was just kind of like a cast of characters. And, you know, some nights it would be a different bunch from the other night, you know. But it was one of those things that after a while, it was hard to keep it together because everybody's just always doing other things, you know. And the money was whatever we were getting at the door. And some nights it was like, okay, we make $20 each, you know. Another night we might, you know. So yeah,
I think it's reminding you of the old days for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Patty said, I gave my no words away. Why'd you do that, Patty? But are you re-releasing it? Yes, they said they are re-releasing it. It's going to be released around Thanksgiving.
Now, I will give you the one little story about the title, No Words. That came from, it was because of something that Paul's wife, her name is Julie, who I've known for a long time. We had an LP gig one night, and several years before, and I think I had just written the song No Words, but I didn't have a title for it yet. It was just untitled, a new song that we were going to do in the gig or whatever. And I went by Paul's house to pick him up because we would go down to the gig together. And Julie was sitting on the couch watching TV or whatever, and I laughed and I said, "So Jules, you know, you're not coming out to hear us tonight? You're not going to sit in the front row and, you know, spur on your hubby to great musical, you know, endeavor, whatever." And she looked at me and said, "Nah." And I just laughed and I said, "Yeah, I guess, you know, I guess what we're doing here isn't really." And she looked at me and I said, "You're not really in this kind of music, are you?" She said, "It's got no words." So, you know, as soon as we, you know, I laughed. As soon as we got to the gig, I said to Paul, I said, "That's the name of the song." So,
so where did the song title 15 Minutes of Shame come from?
That was Paul's title. The song started with the initial idea, I think, of the song was mine, but Paul put the title on it. Was basically, well, it's just kind of comment on where we're at, you know.
As opposed to 15 Minutes of Fame, it's a little play on that. I got,
yeah.
But that song is amazing because we were listening earlier today, and the changes that are in that song are fantastic. It's like you start breaking down, then everything just shifts into a completely different time pattern, and it's like,
well, that's what I'm saying, how the shit comes together, because the song just started with the bass line, which was mine. And that was basically, I came in, was one of the first things that we were going to work on, and I said, okay, I got a bass line here. I don't know where we're going with it. So it's like we laid it down, and Paul said, okay. And I said, I don't really have anything yet to go with that. So we'll just, so I come in the next day, and Paul's got all this other shit on it. So we get to the bridge, and I actually at this point cannot tell you what was his and what was mine. Wow. And that's the way, that's what we like about it. And I said, was that you? Was that yours? And I said, I don't know. But it was just don't thing and basically just throwing shit up against the wall and see what sticks, you know. But the thing is, it's Paul and I are both way past the point of wanting to argue about stuff, because you know we're not going to initially agree on everything, and basically it's like, okay, we'll have that argument later. Let's get on with the rest of the song. We can come back to that argument, you know. Right. And by the time we're done with it, it said whatever what we were disagreeing about, I don't even remember. Cool. Let's just, you know. Now and if it's something that neither one of that both of us aren't completely into, then it's out of here. You know, it doesn't matter who came up, because I can say, well, yeah, you know, I can always do something with that on my own later. Ha ha ha. Vice versa. Right. So it's like, let's get on to the next. So that's what makes it just keep rolling. That don't work, it's out of here. We got more than enough stuff to bring in. We actually we do for LP have probably about another 4 or 5 songs that were recorded at those sessions that we have not finished. That, you know, we figured that, said, okay, that's for the next album. I've got a stack of stuff that's halfway finished that at any time we could go in and do something with it. You know, we'll see how this album goes.
Yeah, right. We're going to bounce around a little bit because we kind of, Rob has a question, but this one kind of segues into this. Stacey wanted to know, was working on the Black album an interesting experience? And my daughter is compelled, so she's coming in here to watch.
No more or less than anything else. You know, what you know, and at face value, being in the studio with Prince in any given situation can be "quote unquote" an interesting experience.
It's true.
You know?
I'd imagine that's correct.
You know, now that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with my own personal opinion about whether it should be interesting or what might be interesting or not about it.
Yeah, there was so much mythos and just weird everything around that album, between that album and Love Sexy. So much, you know, so many weird and there were all kinds of strange stories that have come out of Paisley Park right around that time period. You had a question about Black Album.
Yeah, I from what I understand, you contributed to at least one track on the Black Album. Did you have more contributions on there? Any others that we don't know about?
The song that I'm supposed to have co-writers on was "Rock Hard in a Funky Place."
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's the one point of contention with me and the whole Prince experience, because when that album, when he decided not to release the album, it was like I saw a good paycheck going away from that one. Now, when it was released as a CD many years later, for a lot of different reasons, unfortunately, the all of the paperwork that was supposed to support that was not, there. I can basically say that from a business standpoint, my experience with Prince was generally positive, as far as the professionalism and everything,
right?
With a couple of exceptions, and this was unfortunately the exception. I have had more than enough, certainly, opportunity that I could litigate the matter. The unfortunate thing from my standpoint is I don't really have any ability to understand or have knowledge of exactly what I should be owed for that. Right. And it could be that I would spend more in lawyers' fees trying to figure out what truthfully it should be, and could end up losing money in the process. Yeah. I tend to look at it this way, try to be philosophic about it. There were occasions over the years when Prince would do me a solid, unsolicited sometimes, sometimes in lieu of something else that was to my benefit.
What are some examples?
Just bonuses for some, and I'm not the only person that he would necessarily do this with. There were a couple times where he would, just basically like that. A couple other occasions where what he was paying me, I could legitimately say bordered on the generous side, in a given situation. Right. So in the long stream of things, I kind of just decided this is something I'm going to have to let go. But there's still a possibility that song might be re-released as a compilation, and at which point I may at that point have to actually do something about it.
Yeah, and I know that you have a question that it's probably that may segue into this a little bit, because you came on board after Prince had kind of dissolved the revolution. Are you close at all with Wendy and Lisa?
Oh yeah.
So are you so I guess, do you guys ever
and Susanna, obviously, I mean, Susan's one of my dearest, closest friends right now. Yeah.
But Wendy, you guys ever sit down and like shop talk about some of those instances, like behind closed doors? I mean, they just kind of some of those experiences, because I know they experienced the same type of thing that you did with Black Album with Dream Factory, because they were their contributions were plentiful
Oh yeah.
on that
Yeah.
entire album. And then once that kind of got
Yeah.
separated out with the separate projects.
Not really. I mean, I don't get a chance to really spend a lot of time with Wendy and Lisa.
Yeah.
But I suspect that their situation was different, in some respects from mine. There's no predicting what basically the situations with Prince could be.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I had a distinct advantage for several reasons as far as and
I think this is going to answer your question.
I think it is.
well the revolution and it's difficult because I don't want to sound condescending or patronizing in any manner.
No.
But the revolution was there for an entirely different reason than I was. And from the perspective, for whatever, for what, the specific reason as to why Prince wanted a saxophone player in this group, the Family, and the fact that he was interested in it being somebody that wasn't a known entity. Because another producer could have said, okay, I'm gonna produce this group, I'm gonna make an album under the name The Family. I've got the lead singers, I'd like a saxophone player on this, but I can worry about hiring a saxophone player for the band later. I just want a credible saxophone player on the album, and I've never used a saxophone player. He might have told my brother, call David Sanborn.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
You mentioned
or
that.
call Maceo Parker, or call
Right.
Michael Brecker. I just need somebody to come and do a session. That's all. For whatever reason, Prince was not in that state of mind. And when he just said, I want a saxophone player in this, and Alan said, well, have you decided who? He said, no, I don't have a clue. So Alan turned him on to me, and that how, I came in.
Right.
I had no illusions or expectations or feeling that, oh my God, I'm going to work with Prince. I've died and gone to heaven. I came to do a gig and get a paycheck.
Yeah.
Right.
And whatever was going to come after that was going to come after that. Because when I came up to do the original session for the Family, I already had the understanding that this album would probably not even be released until a year later. Because this was right as Purple Rain was coming out. So he had bigger fish to fry. He was all of a sudden going to be the biggest thing out there.
Right.
And I'm thinking, with a cat like this, a year from now, he might just say, oh, the hell with his family. That was last year. I ain't got time for that no more. Because that I'd already, my brother already clued me a lot about what Prince's character and was. So I had no expectations that necessarily anything was ever going to come of this. I came into Minneapolis to get a paycheck and do a session. And I went home, went back to Atlanta. Yeah. And I didn't see Prince for another 2 or 3 months until, so my involvement with him was incremental. And at that time, there was no thought in my mind that I would ever end up being in his band. It wasn't something I ever thought about or anything that I aspired to. It wasn't a thought that, oh boy, would I love to be in this band. Didn't even cross my mind. I'm here to do this, and whatever happens, happens. So,
right.
I'm go ahead.
Yeah, it seems like where you're concerned, like you said, and this seems to be pretty common with a lot of musicians that worked with him, is that you kind of come to this philosophical feeling about the time that you worked with him and that relationship. But in some of the things you've said before, it still feels like you had a little bit of a different relationship. Do you think that's because of your perspective as coming in and saying,
because Prince is not stupid,
right.
And he said in his very words, he did say, and I agree with him. He said to another musician in his band once in this particular situation, and I won't talk about who that was or what the situation was, but Prince basically said to this, and it goes for all of us. I don't pay you to like my music. I pay you to play it.
Right.
Right.
Now, here's the thing. The Revolution and all those cats, their entire musical experience was Prince. That's all. That's all they knew.
Right.
Particularly somebody like Wendy. She's 19 years old, and her first professional gig is the freaking Purple Rain tour.
Yeah.
You know, so you know, and everything was homegrown, and there was this sense that Wendy once said something in an interview, which I know where she was coming from, and I think she's right. She said, "Well, the Revolution was the only of Prince's band where he was a member of the band." And I said, "Well, okay, I get what she's talking about that,
Right?
but that's not really what it was either."
Because he was still the captain of the ship.
Because his whole thing, you got to understand that Prince is somebody who desperately needed something that he didn't have in his life. And that's what this music and that was. His whole thing was, I need to convince everybody, and particularly in the early days before the shit blew up and before he really figured that, okay, this shit can work. How do I make this shit work? I need to convince everybody in my band that this shit can work.
Right.
Because I need them to come and able every day to be able to convince me that this shit is going to work. So everybody had a stake in it.
Right.
That was, you're either in it or you're not. And I didn't have that perspective. This was a gig.
Yeah.
This was not some fantasy. This was not the Wizard of Oz, you know.
Right. And you said many times that you really weren't a big, you know, you weren't really a huge Prince fan, and I guess that definitely has changed over the years as probably his music has progressed and kind of stammered into some of the taste that you have. But was Prince ever really aware that? Was Prince aware that you were not?
He had to have been.
Yeah,
he had to have been, because because it now when I remember once, you know, we did the sessions for the family, and then when he went on the Purple Rain tour, he invited me to come out and join the band on that tour. And for the last couple months of the tour, I was on the tour, and we'll come up and play some songs. Just I'd solo on a couple songs, and I was there only for his amusement. I mean, really, because nobody in the audience knew who the hell I was. I wasn't a character in the movie or the band. I was just all of a sudden some guy who's playing a horn that they didn't know what the hell it was. And, you know, I was there purely for Prince's amusement, whatever. And I remember, you know, and at that point, I'm still kind of figuring out, well, you know, how good is this guy? Like, what really is this guy about as a musician beyond just this? And when he would close the concert with the song Purple Rain, obviously the song builds up to the solo, the guitar solo, as iconic and recognizable a guitar solo in the history of pop music. But there were nights, I don't know if he did it every night, but there were nights where the band Wendy would hit the first chords of the song. They'd come in with the groove. Because Prince was off stage, because it was an encore. Prince was off stage. He would come back on stage. And some nights he would play a guitar solo at the beginning of the song. And not a rock solo, but just a dry, no effects, dry guitar solo. Just very soft while they're just kind of just, you know, hitting the vamp. And then he'd start to sing the song. And the first night I ever heard him do that was the first time I think I ever listened to him as, holy shit, this cat can play some guitar. Because it wasn't something that was affected or a character driven solo. It was just him with his freaking guitar playing extemporaneously. And it was a whole different thing. You know, at that point, it was maybe the first time that I really sat and listened to him from just that. I said, I'm not listening to him as Prince. I'm listening to him. I can play some guitar.
Yeah. Right.
You know, and I mentioned that to him the next day, and not in a way, you know, I mean, you don't compliment Prince from a perspective of trying to earn brownie points, because you can see through that, you know, and that wasn't my, you know, that's not who I am anyway. But I was just from musician to musician. I just happened to mention this. I said, dude, said, by the way, man, I said, that was a really, really cool solo you played on Purple Rain. And he at first thought I was referring to the main solo at the end. And he looked at me and said, Eric, I play that the same way every night. And I said, no, dude, I don't mean that. I mean what you played at the front of the song. And he looked at me, and when he sometimes would genuinely understand that this was not, this wasn't about Prince. This is what here's a musician, and then he got really shy, and he said, "Oh, well, thank you, that's nice of you to say that, But now on the other end, but we're going back to like the business side of things. I understand the circumstance that Wendy and Lisa and the Revolution are in, as far as how things were,
tumultuous
for the money, and all that. You got to also understand how a lot of this music comes together too, because we would be jamming, and everybody wants to contribute. It's who we are. It's what we do.
Right.
So when you got somebody like Prince and you're in something like that, and he's open to ideas, you want to be the one that's going to throw in the idea that might actually end up being something.
Right.
Yeah.
But you also need to understand to be careful what you're looking for, what you're asking for. Because he's the only one that's going to make a decision as to what the value is. Now, it's always a fine line. For me as a horn player particularly, he could ask me to come in and throw something like, well, take a song like Girls and Boys. It's one of the first songs that I put baritone saxophone on. Because all of a sudden he fell in love with that instrument. So everything for like a month was baritone. And so we're doing that. The track was done, and he's with me and he said, give me a line. I need something. So I came up with that baritone line, whatever it was, a corny ass line. I'm sorry, it's a real cliche-ridden corny ass line, but it fit what the thing was. I'm just, he wants a baritone sax. I'm going to give him like a real cliche-ridden James Brown baritone, all the low notes, and he loved it, right? So now, he gave me a bonus on that, but unsolicited. Now I got paid for the session, but now that's not a circumstance where I have any legal right to claim writers. Because he doesn't need that line in order to sing Girls and Boys.
Is that how it works? Is that legally how it works? If you're
yes.
if like somebody, so if you just come in and if the melody is kind of already there and you're adding your pieces, you legally don't have any right to.
No.
Okay.
No. I get paid. I get paid for the session. It's a fee for service.
Okay,
and that's according to American Federation of Musicians rules. So I get paid for the session.
But what anything on top of the session? What if you just came into the studio and he was jamming and you just kind of sat in and jammed and it was just you just happened to be there, chilled?
If it went to tape, I get paid.
Right. Gotcha.
Even as 90% of the stuff that I recorded for Prince is still in the vault, was never released. It's on tape. And for every session, there was a contract filed with the union. I got paid. Now, if he wants to give me a bonus, that's on him. And for something like that, and that song, he did. Now, he gave me writers and songwriting and publishing on the song "It's Gonna Be a Beautiful Night" from the Sign of the Times album.
The live track, yeah.
Right. That was put together at the sound check on that gig in Paris in the afternoon. He came up with the groove. Someone did. Mark Brown came up with the bass line. Matt Fink came up with the keyboard part. He looked at me and said, Eric, I need a line. Gave him the line. Bap, whatever it was. That's the song. We did it on the gig that night. Now, there were a lot of overdubs in the studio later, did a lot of overdubs to post-production on that. I got paid for the session. I had no expectation that I would have songwriters or publishing on that song. But he gave a piece of it to me, and he gave a piece of it to Matt Fink.
Okay.
I would have had no legal, there was no sense that I would have, I did not have a legal, case to go to him and say, hey, you need to give me a piece of that. I got paid for the session. He decided to give me a piece of it. Decided to give Matt Fink a piece of it. He did not give Mark Brown a piece of it.
Mark has
Brown
some
was
stories.
Yeah. Now, the fact is, Mark Brown had no legal recourse any more than I did. That's just Prince deciding, I'm going to be friendly with Eric and Matt. But Mark Brown, he was out of the band by then, or soon after that. So he was angry. Right. Mark Brown, he quit. I ain't giving him a piece of this. And he didn't have a legal necessity to. So now, there is always a fine line between what really is legally copyrightable or not. So I'm not going to second guess Wendy or Lisa about, because I know so much of the stuff that they contributed. And a lot of the stuff they contributed possibly could be more legitimately a part of what a song is. Right. Mountains was their song. So I'm sure they got paid for that because they were credited with that. Power Fantastic was Wendy and Lisa's song.
One of my favorites. One of my favorites. Yeah. Some of my favorite songs were penned by Wendy and Lisa.
Yeah.
Now, not like all of them, but I'm just saying, Power Fantastic being an example of them. The one that was just anyway,
but here's the thing. When we did the Family album, there are two instrumentals on. First of all, if you read the songwriting credits on the label of the Family album, they're arbitrary because he decided to just put on the label, this song was written by Jelly Bean, this song was written by Jerome, this song was that. That's all bullshit. Prince wrote everything. Well, the song River Run Dry was Bobby Z's song. That was Bobby Rifkin's song, so he got paid for that. Okay. Everything else was written by Prince except there are two instrumentals on the Family album. One was called Susanna's Pajamas and the other one's called Yes. The melody for the song Yes was mine because it was just a track. So he had me come in the studio and I put the horn solos on, a horn arrangement, but also what constitutes a melody. Because if somebody's going to say to you, I want to hear, play the song Yes, you're going to have to play that melody because that's what the song is. That was mine. Susanna's Pajamas was just an extemporaneous solo from beginning to end, but it's the only thing that can be referred to as the melody. So on those two songs, now I was, I've been working with Prince for a long, less than a year, but I said all of the other stuff that I played on the album is just solos and arrangements. So that I don't have, I got paid for that. That's that done deal. But here are two songs where I do have a legitimate case to have songwriting and or publishing royalties coming from those songs. I asked Prince, I said, whom do I talk to in your organization about that? And he said, talk to my business manager. Well, I ended up actually talking to one of his personal managers, Bob Cavallo. And I'm the new kid here. So, and Bob didn't want to hear this. He's Prince's manager. You didn't want to hear from me. Right. But I said, look, Bob, there are two songs in this album that I should have a piece of because the melodies are mine. They constitute part of the song. And Bob is not looking out for my interest. You don't owe me anything. He works for Prince. Right. So his whole thing was, here, kid, he's a here, kid. Yeah, let me tell you how this works, kid. And he said, Eric, you're new here. You don't want to rock the boat. You got a lot of opportunities. And I said, Bob, I said, this ain't my first rodeo. I do not. And I said, first of all, I'm not coming to you with an ultimatum. I understand what's in this for me. All I'm saying to you is you have an opportunity to hear. You said you have a decision to make. You're either going to do the right thing or not. I'm not saying that I'm going to sue you. I don't have the resources to do that. I'm not even coming to you saying this is what I should get for this. I'm just telling you, I'm the new guy here and you're representing Prince's interest. Prince's interest is to have a good relationship with me as much as it is in my interest to have a good relationship with Prince. And you're the person right now that's going to decide whether that happens. Yeah. What are you offering me? And he called me back the next day. This is what we're offering. I said, done deal.
Yeah. So I mean, he's probably got to break that news to Prince and sit down with him.
Maybe he did. You know, maybe he did.
says-
Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't. I suppose he did. But you know, but the thing is like, I don't know how the relationship started with the people in the revolution, because they're there. This is my life. This is what my life is. They're not thinking about those things. I am.
Right.
This is a gig. This is how I make a living. Yeah. So you put that on, and the basic thing was, maybe I should have even gotten more than what they offered. I wasn't worried about that. I was just putting it, I need to start to define the relationship.
Right. Yeah.
Now.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. You know, that's all.
Yeah. And that's,
yeah.
That's a good thing. I mean, you know, and I see, you know, Julie said, you know, it's good for you for speaking up. I know a lot of people, you know, we hear stories all the time. I mean, you know, Mark is a friend of mine and he's been on the show. He talked about the whole Kiss scenario and everything that happened with that song. And, you know, so we hear those stories constantly, people that have gone into the Prince camp and maybe felt like they contributed a lot more than really they're legally, you know, obligated to get credit for.
Yeah. You're talking to James Brown's band back in the 60s.
Oh, yeah. Every single documentary, I mean, no matter how hard they try, every single documentary they do about James Brown, that comes up. All the time that they didn't get paid, but he's walking off jets with fur coats on, and it's like, okay, hold on a second, time out.
Yeah. I mean, here's my most famous, one of the most famous things about putting it in perspective, and it's a Miles Davis story, but it has to do with, Miles Davis in 1960 recorded one of his most iconic albums called Sketches of Spain. And it was an album of just absolutely gorgeous music. The iconic writer and arranger Gil Evans was the arranger for that. They did several albums together.
Yeah.
The main piece of the album was a piece called the Concierto de Aranjuez or something like that. It was written by a classical composer by the name of Rodriguez.
Yes.
It was a classical piece for symphony orchestra. Gil Evans took the music and edited it, took only one part of it. It was a full symphony. He took one movement of the symphony and completely rearranged it for brass, no strings, brass, jazz percussion, whatever. And it became one of the most significant albums in Miles Davis's career. Gil Evans would tell the story about he got paid for the arrangement, you see, because part of his deal. Now, I'm sure Gil had a piece of the album because he was an artist on the album, but basically the bulk of what he got paid was for the arrangement, which was whatever the contract was between him and Columbia Records. And at that time, I wouldn't have been surprised if maybe he got $1,000 for it. You know, maybe he got more, he might have gotten less. You know, this is 1960. But anyway, he laughed. He always would laugh. Gil Evans would laugh and said the thing is that the composer Rodriguez didn't like what we did with it. But Gil Evans said, I'll bet he liked it when he started getting royalties, because he was the composer, because the piece had never been successful until Miles did it. Only after Miles made a hit record out of it did symphony orchestras start to realize, hey, this might be something we want to play. So, you know, and Gil Evans said, I might have spent more time and energy writing the damn arrangement than he did writing the piece to begin with. But I didn't write it. So I don't get songwriters to publishing. I just made it easier for him to get more money than he ever made on the song before. So that's how that shit works, you know. So
such a complicated industry, especially in that regard, just rights and stuff.
So it helps to know, you know, what have some background. Now, like I said, when I told Bob Cavallo this wasn't my first rodeo, because I had been doing this. I'd already been doing this for a career for a long time, you know, and I wasn't coming up in somebody's camp, you know. So that, now, having said that, there are many musicians in Prince's bands over the years that had much the same relationship and the same attitude that I did. I'll give an example. I would say maybe all around, maybe one of the greatest keyboard players he probably ever had in his band was Renato Neto, who played, you know. Now, Renato and I had played together in a band with Sheila E. called the E-Train in 94, 95, which is still one of the hippest, greatest bands I ever played with. And Renato Neto, well, you know, so I already knew Renato. And I said, man, this cat is ridiculous. So when he ended up playing with Prince years later, I said, oh, that's funny. I hope Prince really understands what he's got with Renato. Renato, he wasn't a fan of Prince. And, you know, specifically, I'm saying he wasn't a fan, not, you know, I'm sure there was music of Prince that he might have enjoyed, but he wasn't taking that gig because, oh my God, I got a Prince. He said, oh shit, I got to gig with Prince. I'm going to get paid. This is going to be cool. Now, Renato, as a keyboard player, he said, yeah, it was also cool because he said, there are things as a keyboard player that I learned from Prince. So why wouldn't I? You know, because there's certain aspects of Prince's playing that are specific to Prince's music that he needed me to know. And he showed me things. It was cool. So, I mean, you know, Renato's open to that. He's a musician. And Renato was there for quite a few years. And Renato was very, very smart in how he handled his relationship with Prince. You know, Renato's a no pushover. And I'm sure he probably got pretty much any and everything that he could have expected. Now, in any given day, I'm sure Renato got stories about Prince like the rest of us do. So, you know.
Yeah, I can imagine. And speaking of Renato, because I know he came onto my radar when he came into town with One Night Alone, that tour. And I just thought, you know, this is somebody who is playing on a level that is really on par and even surpasses what Prince was doing, and it was staggering because I kept wondering to myself, it's very, very rare that Prince likes to put people on stage that can potentially outperform him or outplay him on a specific instrument. He always likes to that's one of the control things that he has. And when he had Renato on the stage, it was just like, wow. I mean,
Renato's from Sao Paulo, Brazil. And I mean, grew up in Brazil. So, I mean, and there is a specific aspect of the harmony of Brazilian music that you grow up with that is, you know, distinct to that. And then coming to, and then having on top of that, the jazz vocabulary, the arrangements and things that he would come up with when we had this band together with Sheila, the E-Train, were just absolutely phenomenal. And he is an absolute wonder at choreographing the different keyboards. I would listen. I've got a lot of private gig tapes of the band that we had with Sheila. And I listened to those tapes and I could swear there were 2 keyboard players in that band, but it was just all Renato, you know? He was absolutely just
beast.
Just terrific.
I was trying to find this question that I had, kind of talking a little bit about, you know, because you were involved a little bit in him in the 2000s, and you saw him all the way back in the period where he was, you know, raunchy. There's a lot of shock factor and a lot of stuff that he wanted to do. And then, you know, you kind of fast forward into the 2000s, and now he's a very focused spiritual person as far as his demeanor, his messages. You know, he's always kind of had, you know, a little bit of something. What was I'm trying to think of the right word. What was your impression of his progression as an individual as far as his spirituality is concerned? And do you feel like that kind of impacted the way that he wrote music? Because I kind of felt like a lot of the way that he progressed as, you know, spiritually really had an effect on the type of music that he was creating and the flow that he was creating.
I can only say from my own personal perspective on that, it might not be something that a lot of Prince's fans want to hear, but he was the same cat.
Fantastic. He was the same.
Because his religion and how he behaved in that was an affectation. Now, I mean, it was very real to him, but his spirituality was absolutely no different then than it was before. It's just that he decided to present it in a different way. Now, a lot of that, he points to Larry Graham as being, you know, an influencer and being a Jehovah's Witness.
Right.
Unfortunately, and like I say, I'm just going to tell straight up, Prince's religion was not about God. Prince's religion was about him.
Yeah.
If you want to know everything about Prince's spirituality, look at the cover of Love Sexy. That was, you know,
Yeah.
his whole demeanor and basically his thought of himself. And this thing that Prince had invented was that I am God's gift to everything.
Well, you know, but in his defense, on the same note, you know, he did make a lot of conscious decisions as far as, you know, he was no longer going to use profanity on the stage. So there was some conscious decisions that he was doing that ultimately affected his music and the way that he.
Well, it certainly was going to on the surface. But here's the thing: I'm convinced that he wasn't doing that because he had some kind of moral awakening. So much of what he did was just his way of saying, well, I'm going to be different. And this is the different way in which I'm going to control everything.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. Because basically, I'm not going to cuss anymore. So none of you can. I'm going to be a vegan now. So none of you can. I'm not going to call my name Prince. So you can't call me Prince. So how are you going to address me? How are you going to relate to me? You have to do it. And it's awkward. So now I've got you at a disadvantage because you don't even know how to address me.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, you're all right. There's a lot of controlling aspects to that. I just thought
Absolutely.
it was hilarious.
Now, in his own heart, did he take it to heart? Sure, he did. Yeah. Because a con man has to convince himself before he can successfully con anybody else.
Oof.
Ouchie.
Ouchie. Ouchie.
Now understand something.
Right.
All of this has nothing to do with the value of his music, because at the end of the day, that's all we really got to talk about.
Right.
Oh yeah. That's his legacy is his music. Yeah.
Here are the two most important things for me about Prince is that this is a guy who had this remarkable musical gift to be able to leave this music that has so positively affected so many millions of people. And for everybody, whether you're a fan of his music or not, but understanding what the value of that legacy is cannot be argued with.
Right.
So it's like we should all be thankful that somebody like that existed.
Yes.
We should also be thankful that that's all he wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because this person with another desire would have been dangerous.
Well, he was dangerous in that position he was in.
He was a very dangerous individual. Yeah.
So thank God it was for that.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's a win-win. He did that, and in doing that, he didn't do this.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Right.
Now, I'm sorry. Now, look, all of that for me is Tweedledum Tweedledee, because I could sit here and I could tell you about things, Prince, that make your skin crawl. Literally. Things he has said to me, things that I know he has said and done to other people, that you could say, oh my God, how does a person like that even have the right to think the thoughts that he has in order to behave like that? But I also know this is a guy who could be exceedingly generous and thoughtful in many other, aspects. You can't reconcile that. Don't even try.
Right.
Now, for me personally, talking about anybody else, for me personally, if somebody who really doesn't know anything about Prince says, oh, you were for Prince, fine. So we'll tell you about that. Let me tell you this. The first thing I'm going to tell you about Prince is what he did for me, which doesn't have a damn thing to do with his music or anything I ever did for his music. For whatever reason, and the reason is his alone, for whatever reason, he heard something in my playing and in my musical aspirations that after we'd done Madhouse and all of that stuff, he came to me and said, screw all that. Said, I want to sign you to Paisley Park Records. I want you to go make your own music. No strings attached. And he gave me a freaking rock and roll budget to make music that, like, ain't going to sell the kind of records that that even justifies. Now, at that point in time, there was nobody else from any other record label banging on my door, say, here, come record for us. Prince came to me and basically said, all I'm interested in you doing right now is making your own music. Here's a contract. Go. No strings attached. You don't have to make it with me. I don't want you to make it with me. He said, what you want to do and what you need to do isn't here. It's wherever you want it to be. All I want is to hear whatever it is that you end up doing. And now, from a standpoint of just a musician to musician, for somebody of his caliber to say that to me, you don't think that means something to me? Of course it does.
Right.
And on top of that, he's got the record company to enable me to do it. It's like, Thank you. I'm out of here. I'll see you. Here's the record when it's done. You know? So all of that is bullshit.
But that's interesting that he said that to you in regards to that. But when it came to the FDeluxe scenario, was something that you guys took upon yourself. He didn't even want to even entertain listening to it because of the fact, was he threatened because you were wanting to use the name? And
Yeah,
as far, I guess that has to be what it is.
But yeah,
You know.
because that was his. Because the family was his.
Yeah, I guess it's just all best.
Now once again, I understood truly that a lot of that has to do with whatever place he is in his life. Because 6 months later, 6 months before, maybe he wouldn't have given me thought that.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And 2 years later, I said, I don't know, I give, whatever. And I'm not saying he would do that for somebody else, whatever. But at that point in time, for whatever reason, he gave me that opportunity. So the first thing I got to say about Prince is, this is a cat who enabled me to do the only thing in music I really ever wanted to do, is to make my own music in my own manner with the musicians that I chose to make it with. And when it came down to doing my second album, and he basically he said, no strings attached, you're free. Here's the budget. Go, get out of here. He said, I called Warner, my brother at that point was still running Paisley Park Records. We sat down with the A&R department, the jazz department of Warner Brothers, who, Paisley Park was distributed through.
Mm-hmm.
And we got them on board because basically, in fact, Prince even laughed. He said, well, what do you think you should do? And I said, first thing I'm going to do, talk to the A&R department of Warner Brothers. He said, you want to get involved with the suits? And I said, yo, Prince, he said, they're the ones that can get me hooked up with the musicians that that I aspire to play with. And sure enough, on my second album, I had one Weather Report's rhythm sections, so it's like, this is what Prince did for me. Everything else is Tweedledum, Tweedledee. There is nothing that anybody in his position could have done for me more meaningful than that. So, and I will always be grateful to him and his memory for having given me that opportunity before anything else. After that, I could talk to him like a dog, like everybody else that worked with him. But at the end of the day, it's all about the music. That's all. This is what this cat left.
Right.
Yeah.
And he wasn't supposed to do anything else.
Right.
Right. Exactly.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's right.
So what the hell? No.
Yeah. I feel that way about a lot of artists.
Well, yeah.
It doesn't matter to me what they did, what happened, how they did it. I mean, that's their business with who they knew, but it's the music that touched me. That's what I felt, and that's what they left. And
most musicians and artists and music they do, like, you really don't have a clue. You don't have a clue as to what the person is anyway, besides just what the music is.
Right.
What and if I'm going to say top 5 musicians, top 10, musicians in my life, Keith Jarrett, the piano player, would be one of them. I mean, it's just absolutely just one of my favorite musicians and all. And everything that I know about Keith Jarrett, that I know, I said, I don't think this is the guy I want to meet. I know a lot about Keith Jarrett, So you see, I got the luxury. I don't have to let him into my home. Right. All I have to let into my home is his music.
Right.
And it's like, you give me the music, you just stay outside. Right. I don't need you in here. I just need your music.
I just need the music.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, a lot of as I said in the last time we talked, so much of that and my ability to have this perspective came from knowing James Brown when I was a kid.
Right.
So I had that opportunity to, like I say, realize to distinguish the value of the product from the person.
Right.
Now, obviously, you cannot. You have to understand the totality of the person because the music is that.
Right.
So you have to take Prince, the good, bad, and everything in order to really understand and appreciate his music. Because the good side of Prince is responsible for some of his greatest music, as the bad side of Prince is.
Right. Yeah.
And that goes for, but still at the end of the day, if you like the music, you like the music. Nothing else matters.
That's
it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I remember reading somebody once, somebody that was distraught because they realized that Prince was a homophobe. I mean, I mean,
kind of
famous,
unusual,
famous story about him asking if Wendy and Lisa, or asking Wendy to come and do a gig this in the late night, or or whatever.
Yeah.
And Wendy said, yeah, I could do that. And then all of a sudden, Prince said, well, first thing you got to do is you got to denounce that you're gay.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
How do I do that? I am no longer a woman. Okay, can I play that?
Right. Yeah. So and I remember reading about or some fan that said, "Oh my God, I don't know if I can love Prince anymore." I said, "Well, it's like, okay,
right.
I get it. If the problem is if you invest so much of your emotional investment in that, and that's what makes it difficult."
Yeah.
And all I can think about is here's put that on a perspective. If anyone is familiar with the music of Richard Wagner, whatever all that shit is. Now, this is a guy that was considered and still considered by many to be one of the most significant composers of symphonic classical music or whatever. Anybody knows anything about Richard Wagner knows that he was a psychopathic and pathological racist and anti-Semite. He was a hero of Hitler's because Hitler knew what, he's dead by then, but I mean, the music of Wagner was like the soundtrack to the Third Reich. He was idolized by Hitler and the Nazis because he was, I mean, this is a guy that literally thought that Jews should just be wiped off the face of the earth. And I know a lot of people, some were Jewish, that have difficulty reconciling the fact that they love his music.
Right.
And in fact, sometime, I forget, in the late 80s or early 90s, I forget exactly when, the Israeli National Symphony Orchestra presented a concert of the music of Richard Wagner in Israel.
Wow.
Now, you don't think that didn't cause a little controversy? Of course it did. And in fact, and I'm trying to think of what Zubin made or one of the whoever was leading the orchestra at the time. But when he decided to do this, and he explained to the orchestra, and he said to the members of the orchestra, "Those of you who do not wish to participate in this, I understand, and you will be excused at full pay. You do not have to participate." And some of them did not say, "I ain't doing this." But he had enough that he could present the program. For what I remember reading, the program was sold out. It was, and his thing was, like it or not, Wagner his music is a significant part of the repertoire of world-class symphony orchestras. And if we are a world-class symphony orchestra, then we must be able to do justice to this man's music as we would to Beethoven or Mozart or whomever.
All of whom were crazy.
All of them were nuts, and may have been pathologically racist as much as Wagner was. So my point is, said, Prince wasn't a homophobe.
Right.
No.
That was just him trying to tell Wendy, I'm in control. Oh, you want to do that? This is what you got to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He used to say dumb shit like that to me sometimes. That was just like, oh, Prince, get a grip.
Well, I mean, he was the one that originally put Wendy and Lisa together on the stage.
That's the whole thing.
That part, anyways.
Yeah, all of a sudden, I'm in the
already a couple. It still doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in the band with the Revolution. There were four of us who were Jews. There were two who were gay. You got blacks and whites, and this is the whole thing. And like 15 years later, he's going to come out, and all of a sudden, he's going to present as a homophobe. No, come on.
Yeah.
Right. You want a homophobe? He's just stupid. That was all about control. That's all that's about.
Yeah, that's it. We've seen
and there on any given day, any of us had to be willing to deal with that. Because that those things that was part of things. My brother said, you were either going to drink the Kool-Aid or you weren't.
Right.
And on any given day, I might think, okay, I'm going to drink the Kool-Aid today, but I'm drinking it because there's a reason for me to drink it. I'm not drinking it because you're telling me to drink it. I drink it because I'm going to get paid this week. But one of these days, I'm not going to drink it, and that and then you're done. And that's cool. And that's what, so it's like Alan once said, said everybody that ever worked for Prince, it might be a wonder, working for Prince was like being in a great movie, but it was always going to have a bad ending.
And bad acting.
That too. Yeah. I used to say to people, they said the only thing that I want to put it said, he did something amazing, absolutely amazing in the film industry. He made Under the Cherry Moon, which many of us would refer to as Under the Cherry Bomb. That's what some of us. And then he did something that was absolutely amazing. He made another movie that was even worse. So, God bless him. But
you can find the backers, then why not?
That's
right. Yeah, exactly. And you know what, I did that because he enjoyed it. He enjoyed going on a movie set and being in control. It was fun because he got action going on. I could tell you to do this, I could tell you to do that, because everything in Prince's life was a movie. His whole life was a movie, and everybody in it was just a character.
Right.
He was the scriptwriter, he was the producer, he was the director, he was the star, and we were just characters in the movie. And if you're willing to understand it from that, and you say, this is gonna be fun for a minute. You're just running down the rabbit hole.
Right.
And all I would say is that if you can run down the rabbit hole, leave breadcrumbs.
Right.
That's all. It was, what the hell?
All right. So I want all the listeners to get it, because you're about to read this question, and I'm gonna. You weren't. You're not gonna read the question. Okay. No. I was going to say, I want all the listeners to definitely grab a pen and paper, because you were going to ask this question, and then I was going to go back to that Blue Note question, because everybody needs to do their homework here, because there are so many artists. There's some names that you mentioned tonight that I'm shaking my head. Yes.
No, I know.
I have no idea who that is.
I know. Yeah.
So I want to remedy that. I really want to rectify that. And obviously we want to do our research and kind of get into the phase of really kind of understanding some of this music that is not mainstream, that that everybody needs to pay attention to. So Rob, you want to go with your question first, and then we'll go to the Blue Note one, and so that we can.
So I know that obviously you're a big jazz fan and jazz man, and you have this enormous collection of records. I love Miles Davis. I'm also a big Miles Davis fan. I'm sure you have stuff I don't have and can't find and probably can't afford.
The only copy of it,
right?
Sorry, I gotta get my paper out for writing.
But I know out of that extension, you've got that extensive collection up there, and we talked about In a Silent Way. I love In a Silent Way. That's one of those I always go back to. Which albums do you tend to go back to, or which artists do you tend to go back to? It's like you may have listened to it 100 times, and you're just like, I got to listen to it again.
I have a musical Hall of Fame.
Oh.
Wow. Of my own personal Hall of Fame. Now, I could give you a list of like 30 or 40 just saxophone players. There's music that I'm into, but if it's more like a musical tree, with the trunk and the branches. And there's certain artists that all of the other artists are tied in some way and relate to these artists.
Gotcha.
And it's Ray Charles, James Brown. Ray Charles, James Brown, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Wayne Shorter and Joe Zawinul, and Eddie Palmieri. Eddie Palmieri is basically, he's in his 80s now, my favorite. The music that I love as much as any music in the world is Afro-Cuban music, which is typically referred to as salsa. Tito Puente, Ray Barreto, all these guys. But Eddie Palmieri is the son of Latin music. He is, for people who are into this music, Eddie Palmieri is like the Miles Davis, the Thelonious Monk, the Duke Ellington of that music all combined.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
There is no artist in music in the world that I have been more proud and thankful to have had the opportunity to play music with than Eddie Palmieri. Nobody.
Well, you got an opportunity to play with him. When was this?
Yes. I've sat in with him. I've known him for 25, almost 30 years now, and had the opportunity to sit in with him, never, on occasion. In fact, he was here last year, right? In fact, the last time I've been on a stage playing music was with Eddie Palmieri at the Dakota Bar and Grill here in Minneapolis about 2 weeks before everything shut down from the pandemic last year, in 2020.
That's a blessing.
I played with him at the Blue Note in New York, other places. So I've had the opportunity to play, over the years to play with him, maybe 6, 7, 8 times or whatever. I've been into his music as a fanatic probably since the early mid 70s, when I really, really got into it. I'm very, very good friends with several of the musicians that have come in and out of his bands over the years.
For those of us who have not listened to any Eddie Palmieri albums in their entirety, where is the starting point for somebody who's coming into?
Wow. Well, this is a guy who's probably got 50, 60 albums in his career.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but you know, like if you say Miles Davis, you can say,
yeah.
You can say,
okay.
I
could say there was an album of his called Sentido, spelled Sentido. Sentido. It may still be, you know, if you go to Amazon or whatever and just type in, you know, some of these might come. There was one that was just known as Eddie Palmieri's White Album, because it was just called Eddie Palmieri. It came out around 1980 or something, and it's got a white cover, and it was the white. His white. The Beatles had their white album. Eddie Palmieri is white album. There's another one called The Son of Latin Music. There's another one called Palo Rumba. I mean, I literally could go on, but Sentido might be one to begin with. Okay. This is a guy who, and Eddie Palmieri is one of the dearest, most wonderful people I've ever met and known in music, and he is, when I was, you know, coming up in the music, and the music that I love, whether it was JamBrown, the jazz stuff, and getting into salsa, there was something in the back of my mind that said, okay, you know, maybe, you know, I mean, this is like when I'm still in music school. Said, if I'm really, really going to be good at this, you know, the opportunity or this scenario where I could ever find myself playing with a Miles Davis, as much of a fantasy as that was, I said, okay, that's something that I have to believe could happen. Because if I don't believe, or musicians of that caliber or something, because if I'm not going to believe that, why am I doing this? Right. Mm-hmm. And all the time I'm getting into this Afro-Cuban music and all of these other great groups, Canuto Libre, Ray Barretta, so many other bands, but particularly Eddie Palmieri, who was the Miles Davis of this music. And I was saying, could that ever happen? Because all of a sudden, you know, all of the music is in Spanish, because, you know, the singing is always in Spanish, because the rhythmic cadence of the language is you know, it's inseparable from the rhythm of the music, you know, and the harmonies and all that. So, and knowing that it is such a close community within, you know, the Puerto Rican and Cuban community, that I'm just some little Jew kid from New York, or I mean, from Milwaukee, whose parents are from New York. So maybe I can play some jazz, but this Afro-Cuban, just because I love the music doesn't mean that, you know, the rhythmic complexity of this music is beyond anything, you know, and all of the other music that I love. And I said, wow, I don't know if that could ever happen. And then through a certain circumstances or whatever, I was able to meet Eddie Palmieri, and he asked me to sit in with him.
That's fantastic.
And the first time I sat in with him, I think it was somewhere around 1992 or 93. He was here in Minneapolis. And my brother took a picture of him. I got a photo of me on the stage, and Eddie's at the piano, and I'm standing next to some of the other horn players. And I just got this look on my face. I'm kind of looking at Eddie, and the caption would be, he said, "What the fuck?" You know, how in the hell did I get here? But so I've had the opportunity to play with him on several occasions. And when he was here just a year ago, at the Dakota, and I played with him, and that was his Latin jazz band. And I mean, these cats are just like, you know, these are cats who live this music every day. This is, you know, and I'm just coming somewhat of a dilettante, you know, and that from my perspective, but yet I'm here playing this music with these guys, and I'm fine, you know, everything's cool. And so well, okay, I can play. I know that I've done this shit, but still, Eddie came to me afterwards, and, you know, like I said, I've known him for a long time. I played with him several times, and I always said, Eddie, man, I cannot thank you enough for asking me to play. And he said, Eric, this is your home. My stage is your home.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's a lot coming from him.
Yeah. No other musician in my life could mean that much to me than that. That's what that music means to me. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like a pretty definitive answer on that one.
Yeah.
You mentioned him last time, and I actually went out and picked up a couple of things. Well, I think I listened online or something. But yeah, I was starting to really get into it. I was just
he still has the ability today to go out. And I mean, this guy, he's probably 80 or 81 years old now, but he always has just the most incredible young musicians that are into this music. And he can go out, and he doesn't sound like an older guy that's just trying to, do what he did 20,
right.
His music and his ability to play the music as if, and a lot of the songs that he plays are songs that he's been playing for 40 or 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
And every time you hear these songs, you sit there and I said, it sounds and feels like this is the first time he ever played it.
Mm.
And that's just incredible.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
That's just absolutely, and he's also just one of the funniest human beings I've ever known. He is a tremendous raconteur and storyteller. I tell you what, if you reached out and got Eddie Palmieri on your show, it would be one of the greatest shows you would ever have, because he is just absolutely, really, absolutely.
He's actually got a couple of shows coming up. He's got November 20th. He's got a show in Flushing, New York, and he's got a couple of shows in Boston, Massachusetts that are coming up at the Scullers Jazz Club. So if you guys are in Boston or in New York,
absolutely,
got to check him out.
Yeah, whether it's with his Latin jazz band, or if he's got the full salsa ensemble with all the singers and the full choros and all of that, it's just like it's the greatest in the world. As much as I love everything. So it was like, that was one of my greatest, I could sit back, damn, I can actually play this shit too. All right. I mean, it was like, yeah. And I'm like, don't take my word for it. I said, Eddie Palmieri says I can, I'm not going to tell you I play. I'll let Eddie Palmieri tell you what the hell. So,
we're going to call on him, and we're going to tell him Eric sent us,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, Arlene said, invite him on, and with Eric. And I was just thinking about, first off, I don't know how that would work.
We're going to have to start giving him like a writer or something.
Yeah, I mean, could well be. Because,
I also got to tell him, my brother Alan has written articles in magazines and journals about Eddie Palmieri, and in fact, Alan told me, I don't know, you guys hip to the magazine Wax Poetics?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
They did. I guess about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago now, I guess, maybe 6 years ago. I don't know. They did a long feature on Eddie and asked Alan, my brother, to write the feature. And Eddie and Alan already knew each other. So Alan was in New York and went to Eddie's apartment, home in New York at the time, and to talk with him or whatever. And there was one point where Eddie sat and played the piano. He had a grand piano in his apartment, and Alan was with him in his living room, and Eddie just started to play some. And I just sat there and I said, "What did you do?" And Alan said, "It was everything I could not to just start crying."
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, just artists like that just mean so much. It's like, and I always found these funny stories about these, world famous musicians that will go into the New York subway and will play in the middle, and like famous people like that are world renowned, like somebody like Eddie, and they'll just be sitting there just playing, and people would just walk by them, maybe throw $1 in the hat, just walk by, get on train.
Well, Sonny Rollins, jazz tenor player, one of the icons of jazz tenor saxophone players, famously would go out into the middle of the Brooklyn Bridge at night and practice.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
There's some stories there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. We have some, like I said, a couple random questions, but I mean, other than that, I mean, I think we pretty much did everything. Now, again, for those of you who are tuning in late, this album right here, Eric Leeds and St. Paul Peterson, No Words, is going to be released sometime around Thanksgiving, and I guess Paul has already said he's gonna come on the show, and we're gonna talk about it. We kind of hipped him to the idea of Black Friday.
Yeah. And any background that you want, just like I say, go to our website, leedspetersonmusic.com. And there's some, I think there's some clips from the album up there and some other things too. You can check out whatever too.
Yeah.
I
Anything
assume
else you're on that's coming out? I mean, do you have your own stuff that's coming out besides this LP re-release? Or
this pretty much is LP is my own. That's pretty much, that's where I live now. So no, not really. Other than that, I'm fortunately in a position where I just play the music I want to play when I want to play it. So. And this is pretty much
that's
what we're doing.
That is
right.
Yeah, that's.
I mean,
That's the bar.
I would love nothing better if Paul and Suze would get together and write some music for FDeluxe. That'd be cool. They do that, but getting them, getting them on the same page to do that is sometimes easier said than done. So.
Yeah, I think I heard somebody. Mention that in the scroll there. Somebody mentioned there was, I guess, a rumor about the they was talking about the revolution. Somebody said something about the revolution getting back together, and something talking about the family getting back together again as another FDeluxe project or whatever. But I think all this stuff is just rumor and conjecture at this point.
Yeah. I mean, we tried to get together, maybe do an FDeluxe gig whenever we've usually done one every year in Minneapolis at the Dakota. Getting everybody together at the same time and being able to make it economically work too is, once again, sometimes easier said than done.
And that LP album, Lenny wanted to know, is that going to be on sale at Electric Fetus? Is it going to be normal distribution? Or
probably not. Probably, unless we do it on consignment,
Okay.
Yeah. And I know there are a lot of people have done that where, they have like batches of music that somehow end up either in.
Yeah. And I mean, basically what that means is I would take 10 copies and take it to Electric Fetus and do it, and do that.
Right.
In fact, I can't remember if maybe I actually did that a couple of years ago. Maybe I don't know. Because I mean, I've still got, where it is, hold on. Let me see. I can't even. I can't even find a copy. I've got my albums that are still available on my website, ericleeds.com. My first album from Warner Brothers, Times Squared. My second one, Things Left Unsaid. There was another album I did called Now and Again. And they're available just on any of our websites. So that's basically it.
And all are spectacular. I mean, if those of you who like Matt, you're welcome. They are. If you like Madhouse, Times Squared is kind of Madhouse inspired. Times
Square was actually originally was going to be the third Madhouse album, but I took it just enough of a different direction. That's when Princess said, "Well, let's release this under your own name." I said, "Well, that's fine with me." So
and then the next album is more your thing.
Yeah, Things Left Unsaid was the one that I really had the opportunity to say, okay, this is where I'm going to be starting from scratch and just do things completely on my own. I mean, to be absolutely honest, I don't want to cut my nose to spite my face, but it is not anything. If somebody is going to look at that album and expect to hear anything that's Prince like, you're not going to hear that on that.
Right. But there's amazing stuff on there. I loved Ela Mujeres.
Thank you. Yeah.
That cover you did of the Tears for Fears song.
Oh, what Women in Chains? Yeah.
Who is Tears for Fears has a new album coming out, don't they?
I think so,
brand new album that's coming out.
Yeah,
which is
but
amazing.
Your cover of that,
thank you, man.
I love that song by them anyway. But your cover, it felt as emotional, maybe more emotional than with the words in my mind.
Well, I have to give credit to the producer on that album. With me was a guy named Gil Goldstein, and Gil is an extremely accomplished and well-known keyboard player, composer, and arranger in the jazz world. I mean, he's like a heavyweight cat, and I was very, very honored and very fortunate to have him be the producer with the album, and he brought that song to my attention.
Okay.
I said, because part of the producer is to bring something that is going to be kind of outside of where I would normally want to go.
Right.
And I mean, be obvious. You know, we're trying to get a couple radio cuts off the album.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's a matter of, okay, here's a song that could serve that purpose, but it's still going to be something that I can sink my teeth in and actually want to do. And you know, we went through a whole bunch of songs, and then finally I said, because I knew the name Tears of Fears, but that's about all I knew. I said, well, here's this. I said, well, Tears of Fears, okay. So I said, oh, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
So he did the basic premise for the song, for basic arrangement. Then I took it from there or whatever. He also there's a song on that album, a Tom Waits song on that album called Soldier Stings. That he brought to my attention, and I played baritone saxophone, and Gil's playing accordion on that, and it came out. I mean, I love the way it came out, you know. But that's what a producer does. So I was very, 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 and it was because of the recording of that album. That's when I met Eddie Palmieri.
Oh,
because the brass players on that album, some of the finest jazz and Latin jazz players, Brian Lynch on trumpet, Charlie Sepulveda on trumpet, and Conrad Erwig on trombone, at the time, they were Eddie Palmieri's horn section. And I got them specifically because I wanted Eddie Palmieri's brass players.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
Gil Goldstein, so I said to Gil, can you get them? He said, sure. Got them. So I met them, and through them, that's how I met Eddie Palmieri. So that's
nice.
So if nothing else came out of that album, that's how I met Eddie Palmieri.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned Times Square, that you said that was actually going to be the third Madhouse album, because there are, you know, for bootleggers and the folks out there that kind of collect some of this unreleased stuff
legally.
Yeah, right. There are 4 tracks that I'm aware of that were part of those that third Madhouse ones.
Okay,
Penetration, Are You Legal Yet? A Girl and Her Puppy.
I should be more specific. Times Squared was going to be the second iteration, the second attempt. We did a third Madhouse album, as you said, with those tracks.
Mm-hmm.
And it was still in the day when vinyl was how, you know, the production was going to be. Those 4 tracks on side A or B. The other side was the 18-minute long Dopamine Rush suite.
Right, 21 through 24 or whatever it was going to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
We recorded the album, and several months went by, and I didn't hear anything more about it. By now, I'm off the road with Prince. That band was, you know, ended. That was the Sign of the Times Love Sexy Band with Sheila E. in that band.
Mm-hmm.
And Alan is now running Paisley Park Records. And I asked Alan, so, well, what's the status for this third Madhouse album? And Alan said, you know, so Prince hadn't said anything about it for a while. So I said, well, that means that Prince is probably having second thoughts. And I said, you want to find out for me? He said, Alan didn't. Alan got back. He said, yeah, Prince. Prince and Alan said to me, he said, Prince wanted to know what you thought of the album. I said, well, that's different. You know, I didn't care for the album particularly. I mean, there's some things that I liked. There's some things I liked, but overall, I wasn't that thrilled with it. But it was not in my interest to necessarily say that to Prince,
right?
Because you know, this is how I earned a living,
right?
Exactly. So I didn't want to necessarily just, you know. So I was a little bit, shall we say, circumspect. I told Alan, I said, would you ask Prince for me, or I'll ask him next time I see him, if I can remix a couple songs? Because I just want to kind of gauge what Prince said to me. He said, okay, go and take a couple and remix them. Before I could even get into studio, Prince then told me, Eric, let's scrap this one. Let's put it on the back burner. Let's just put this one aside. Let's try again. I was all for that, because it was like, okay, that keeps the project alive.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I'm like, well, hell, maybe this next one will be something I like.
Right.
Anyway, Prince then came to me and he gave me 4 cassettes, analog cassettes that I still have, of stuff from the vault. All instrumental stuff, most of it uncompleted, just work product. And he gave me the 4 cassettes and he said, start here. If there's anything you like on any of this stuff, run with it. So, okay, if you got anything your own. Now, the thing was, by now, Madhouse was it was his, everything was done from his perspective. Madhouse was his project entirely. This was the first time where it's like he's basically handing it over to me. The reason was that he had just gotten the assignment to do the Batman album.
Yeah,
and it needed to be finished really fast. So he was basically saying, I got to go do this. I don't have time to deal with Madhouse. You're going to have to go run with it. I said, fine. So I took all of that material. Anyway, I came up with this album that was called Times Square. Now, I took the Dopamine Rush suite from what was going to be the third one that we had already done scrap. And I said, part of it I really, really liked. A lot of it I thought was a bunch of horseshit. So I basically thought, well, let me just edit it down. So I took 18 minutes of it and I just sat and listened to it. I like this. I don't like that. This is nice. I think that's dumb. I think this. I squished it together. I had about 7.5 minutes, and that came out on the album. It's just called The Dopamine Rush. Now, I was a little concerned about that because this was something of Prince's that had already been completed, and now I'm just basically taking a knife to it. That's different from me just coming up with something of his that's uncompleted. This was done. Right. But I said, well, what the heck, in for a dime and for a dollar. So when I gave him the final version of what I was doing, and I said, look, this is what I did to Dopamine Rush. So if you're not cool with this, then I won't run with it. Fortunately, he okayed it. He was fine with it. So that's how that came out. So anyway, those other 4 songs never saw the light of day, except he actually sent 2 or 3 of them to Miles Davis. And Miles was playing some of those songs with his band.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd heard that story. Yeah.
And I think Miles actually recorded some of them with his band too. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I know
I heard that it was played live, but I didn't remember it being.
Yeah, but some of them were recorded on albums that have been released that he was, So I said, fine, let him in. I didn't push over the song.
I know we're closing up things here, but Chester did actually have a question. He said, did Alan have any part in creating NPG, or I guess putting the band together at all?
No.
Yeah, I would imagine that's a Prince control thing. That's been the theme tonight.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Because all of us that were in his band at that time, 85, 86, 87, we were under exclusive employment agreements.
Right.
So when I brought, like everyone else, when I was in his band, it was like he had to be a contract. No one put a gun to my head, said I signed, but it was like it was a good deal. But it was a 3-year deal, running from April of 86 through April of 89. So that was basically that was what the gig was. So when that came, we finished the Love Sexy gigs. We played in Japan, I think it was in January or February of 89. And those were the last gigs that band played. And we all knew that he wasn't going to be renewing the contracts then because he wasn't planning to go out on the road later that year. And, I don't know about anyone else, but I was fine because I said, good, this is all I wanted this to be. I signed for 3 years. That's all I wanted it to be. I had no interest in, he actually did come to me and some other, and offered me the option to maybe come back out with him the next year. And I turned him down because I just, by then I was done with it. I got everything that I was going to get out of being in the band. So now look, he assigned me to the label. So I was, just about my own music by then. So anyway.
Yeah. According to Alan, Alan L126, is that your brother?
Yeah, that's that. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
So Miles recorded them. Hey! Okay, so Miles did record them. Okay.
Yeah. So Alan Leeds is on. He said that Miles did record them at ECM in Germany. I was looking that up. I think I left the L out. I was like, is that Alan? I wanted to know.
That's him.
Hello, Alan. Nice to see you.
In fact, I'll do my brother solid. Here's a book in case you know.
Yeah, somebody.
You talked about that last time.
Yes, I think somebody mentioned that book was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and like I said, a lot of it has to do with the history and background, the Chitlin circuit and all of that.
I wish I knew. I wish I was paying attention because he had a bunch of comments in here, or at least said the best subway music is on the A line in New York.
There you go.
Yeah, what else do you say? The EP is an NEA Jazz Master.
Okay.
About Palmieri.
In fact, I'm talking about New York and the subways for many, many years. I think it just closed not too terribly long ago. One of the greatest record stores for Latin music and salsa and Afro-Cuban music was down in the subway and at 42nd Street. There's a cavern and labyrinth of subway, entrances and exits for different lines, and a lot of retail shops down there. And there was a record store there that existed for decades. That was like one of the greatest Latin jazz record stores in the world. And like everything else, I think it finally closed not too terribly long ago. But anyway,
nice. Gentlemen, do you have any more questions? I mean, I am so glad we get able to get you back on because we had just a volume. I mean, we had that long list of questions and you answer them so eloquently, and some you answer without us even asking. So
which is great.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Completely psychic or psychotic, one of the two. We haven't
there
decided.
you go. Yeah, I'm good with that. Yeah. Cool.
Well, gentlemen, I mean, thanks to Paul for joining us for a brief moment. And again, the LP album, the last one, not the new one, the last one, New Words, is going to be available coming around Thanksgiving. Oh yeah, I did. Okay, I'm sorry.
Right there.
There it is. Yeah, and just so you know, the guest artist on that, Questlove, plays on a track on this.
And it's we noticed that, and I mentioned this to Rob. I said it says additional drums and drum solo on Quick to Dismiss. Questlove is heard favoring the left channel, and Peter is heard favoring the right channel. So is so is he just he's on the left side of it? He's on
the left side, and Petar, our drummer Petar, he's on the right side of it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And they're kind of playing off each other. It worked out cool. Yeah. Questlove has been a very, very wonderful supporter of all of us. Paul, myself, and for many years, and we're very, very appreciative of. Yeah,
he's extremely purple.
Yes. That too. Yeah.
Pretty hardcore.
Yeah. I sometimes make him drool because of some of the private tapes that I have. That Questlove would love to get his hands on.
Right.
And well, maybe someday.
I heard an interview that said he spent upwards of 6 figures buying various bootlegs and things that he thinks are rare finds, and there's tons of them out there, I'm sure. I wish that I had enough disposable income to acquire some of them, but or at least bribe you in some form or fashion, or because Sheila E has also, like she said, she had like many boxes of cassettes that are just sitting there of that. He continually freely gave them out on a regular basis, but
I can't even spell 6 figures, so I don't.
I've got some things that I have a feeling are that only I have. I think some things. Yeah.
Wow. Nice.
Eric, sir, once again,
right.
It is
Gentlemen,
an honor to have you on board.
So
Everybody, woo!
You'll hear from Paul. You'll hear from Paul when we, get the final date and everything for the release of the CD.
Perfect. We absolutely look forward to it.
Yeah.
Thank you so
much.
Thank you,
gentlemen, for your support, all this, and listening to me run my mouth. I very appreciate it. Thank you.
We could listen for days, but
don't say that.
Just not this day.
Not today.
And Alan,
you should, nepotism no side. Get Alan on, because Alan, has a perspective on so much of this shit that comes from.
Absolutely, would love to.
We've got Alan.
You hear that, Alan? There you are.
Got Eddie lined up now. We're gonna.
No, I say that because he's, he'll buy me dinner tomorrow night. So
awesome. Okay, we'll get you dinner.
Yeah. I told you.
All right.
Buy you dinner and take you to a Braves game. So.
There you go. All right, man.
All right. See you later.
Thank you.
Adios.
Okay, dope.